Exhaustion just vanished, like someone flipped a switch. I blamed it on stress. My anxiety always made exams 10 times worse. Someone flipped a switch. But the next night, I blamed it on stress. Always bad exams 10 times freaking out to switch. But the next night, I blamed it on caffeine wears off in hours. Always bad exams 10 times freaking out. Seriously wrong. I blamed caffeine wears off in hours. Always bad exams 10 times freaking out. Seriously wrong. I blamed caffeine wears off in hours. Always bad exams 10 times freaking out. Seriously wrong. I blamed caffeine wears off in hours. Always bad exams 10 times freaking out. Seriously wrong. I blamed caffeine wears off in hours. They told her it was safe. They told her it would make her beautiful. They told her to put it on her tongue. They told her it was safe. Only 15. They told her it would make her beautiful. She had been working in the clock factory for months. They told her it was their small hands painting the delicate faces of timepieces with luminous radium. It glowed under her brush like liquid lime, enchanting and mysterious. The other girls whispered about how pretty it made them look, how magical their smiles became under the pale light. Ruth laughed too, painting her dress, her cheeks, even her lips, pretending it was all part of a game. But the glow came at a cost. Her body started to betray her in subtle ways. Her teeth became brittle, some falling out entirely. Her skin erupted in strange, angry sores. Her hair thinned, then fell, leaving black strands clinging like shadows. Blood often seeped from her gums or lips, unbidden and relentless. Yet she smiled, hiding the pain. She couldn't stop, for the factory's managers were strict, their eyes always watching, their voices dripping with greed and manipulation. They didn't care about her life. They only cared about the radiance she brought to their clocks. One evening, after the long hours, Ruth returned home exhausted, her limbs aching, her body whispering its revolt. She collapsed onto her bed, barely noticing the autumn breeze leaking through the cracked window. The world spun, darkened, and her vision blurred. She felt the poison seep deeper, beyond her flesh, into the very marrow of her bones. And then, she died. Or so the world thought. Her soul did not leave. It transformed. The rod of radium twisted her essence, merging agony with power. Ruth rose from the bed, a haunting figure of vengeance. Her hair floated like black tendrils, her dress and eyes glowing a sickly green, a bioluminescent echo of the poison that had stolen her life. Her hands became ghostly, semi-transparent, her feet fading from the shins down, leaving her floating just above the ground. Her body bore the scars of her suffering, but now they seemed like armor, a testament to her wrath. Ruth looked at the world she had left behind and understood. She was bound here not by chance, but by purpose. She was here to punish, to avenge herself, to remind anyone who dared exploit innocence of the cost of cruelty. The first factory she returned to was the one where her life had ended. It was late evening, and the young girls were finishing their shifts. They didn't know the horror waiting. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and then shattered, glass raining like a storm. Buckets of radium tipped over, spilling their toxic contents across the floor. The room shook violently, shelves crashing, windows splintering under an unseen force. A child's laughter echoed a sound both joyful and terrifying, yet no child stood laughing. Ruth had arrived. The manager, a man with a greedy sneer, ran in, confused, shouting at the chaos. "What is happening? You girls, what have you done?" But the voice that reached his ears was not human anymore. An invisible hand grabbed him, forcing his face into the radium. The poison burned, filled his mouth, stung his eyes. He screamed, thrashing, but Ruth stamped him into the floor. A jagged, cruel smile etched across her glowing face. He would become a warning, a lesson. From the shadows, the other girls watched in terror. Ruth did not harm them yet. They were witnesses to what happens when innocence is destroyed, when greed and negligence meet a fate it cannot comprehend. She haunted every place of suffering next, Hospitals where girls like her were sent to die quietly. Ballrooms where her youthful self had once danced in glowing joy. Factories where children still painted with the same deadly luminescence. Each location trembled under her presence. Machinery ground to a halt. Lights flickered, shattered. Shadows stretched unnaturally, curling like serpents in every corner. The world bent around her, as if acknowledging the injustice done. Her form was beautiful and horrifying at once. Her glow illuminated the room, green and eerie, a reminder that her life had been stolen for profit and amusement. Her eyes, glowing like two shards of malice, scanned her surroundings for the greedy and cruel. Her laughter echoed softly, a sound that would chill the spine of anyone who had wronged her. Ruth's revenge was meticulous. She did not simply attack, she terrorized. She would create fear, slowly, making those who harmed children see the consequences of their greed and cruelty. Sometimes, she would let them live, just to watch the terror grow in their hearts, to let the poison of guilt seep as deeply as the radium had poisoned her. Yet there was a cruel beauty in her vengeance. Wherever she floated, time seemed to warp. Shadows twisted unnaturally, and the faint glow of green light pulsed like a heartbeat. It was as though the radium that had destroyed her body now empowered her, turning her suffering into a supernatural weapon. Her story spread among factory workers and hospital staff alike. Whispered warnings were passed along in hushed tones. Beware the girl who glows green. She was beautiful once, but her wrath is eternal. Respect the young, or you will know her vengeance. Ruth became a legend, a dark spirit of historical horror. She existed between worlds, her form neither fully alive nor dead, bound by the injustice of the Radium Girl's fate. And she waited, ever patient, for the next time someone would exploit innocence. For the next moment when cruelty would meet her luminescent wrath. No one truly knew where she might appear next, sometimes a deserted hospital, sometimes an abandoned factory, but all who did encounter her agreed on one thing. Ruth was relentless. Her glow was no longer elegant. It was terrifying, unstoppable, and a luminous reminder of the cost of greed and exploitation. And at least, she whispered into the ears of the guilty, I glow. Tonight, I am gone. Tell you the true horror story of a haunted house. So evil that no one can live there for more than a month without going crazy or disappearing forever. Let's just call it Blackwood Manor. I've been renting homes for over 20 years, but Blackwood Manor is unlike any property I've ever dealt with. The house sits right here at the end of Oak Street. Looks are deceiving though, because behind its beautiful gardens and fresh coat of paint lies something sinister. Every person that stays in that house disappears after exactly 30 days. You might be thinking this is a joke, some sort of twisted game, but it's not. Each tenant vanishes without a trace. No goodbye notes. No phone calls to loved ones. Nothing. Like they simply ceased to exist. It all started 5 years ago with the Miller family, a husband, wife, and their infant daughter. They were the picture of perfection, always smiling in their Sunday best. I remember the dad even said, "We're so excited to raise our family here." Then, just as quickly, they vanished. One morning, Mrs. Peters from across the street called me in tears. She said the front gate was wide open and the child's toys were lying around, but the family was nowhere to be found. When I went inside, it was as if they'd vanished into thin air. Their clothes lay where they'd left them. Dinner sat on the table growing cold. Even their dog, Sparky, was still tied up in the backyard. It was like they'd disappeared on purpose, except they hadn't packed a single bag. The police searched everywhere, but after 3 weeks, they admitted defeat. It was the strangest case they'd ever seen. Since then, I've rented the house to dozens of people, each eager to make it their home, but each leaving after a month. There was Rachel and Mark, a young couple who argued constantly but seemed inseparable. One minute they were throwing dishes, the next they were gone. Then there was Ethan Pierce, a writer who came to the house seeking solitude. He filled notebooks with stories about Blackwood Manor, but he never finished his masterpiece because after 30 days, he vanished. And lastly, Olivia Rhodes, a woman with a troubled past, who hoped a fresh start would help her find peace. She was always polite, thanking me profusely for letting her stay. But before I could utter a word, she disappeared along with the rest. I tried to investigate, digging into the house's history, anything to find a connection between these cases. That's when I stumbled upon a dusty journal hidden in the attic. Its pages detailed the darkest horrors imaginable. Built in 1872 by the infamous Silas Blackwood, the manor became known as Blackwood Manor. But what most didn't realize was the home wasn't just a residence. It was the center of a satanic cult, preying on the innocent townspeople. In the journal, I read of sacrifices made under the light of the full moon, of stolen souls and rituals designed to bring forth an ancient evil. And as I flipped through the brittle pages, I found a name circled in red ink, Elijah Crane. Could he be connected to the disappearances? Was he the source of the evil? Or was he just another victim, consumed by the darkness? To uncover the truth, I delved deeper into local lore, searching for answers. Whispers spoke of an entity known as the Unkind, a being of pure darkness, that craved the essence of mortals. Some believed the unkind lurked within Blackwood Manor, using its inhabitants as vessels to cross over into our world. But the question remained, what did it want? As I grappled with these questions, Blackwood Manor stood silent, its secrets buried deep within its walls. I longed to understand the mystery, to shed light on the darkness that lurked there. But the shadows seemed determined to keep their grip on the manor's history. Years passed, and the cycle of tenants continued. One month they'd move in, full of hope and dreams for the future, only to vanish without a trace. I watched each new arrival, hoping to catch a glimpse of what happened to the others. But their faces, their names, their voices blurred together in my memory, each face becoming a haunting reminder of the manor's curse. Then I met William Hayes, a historian, drawn to the manor's mysteries. He promised to unravel the truth. Finally, someone who understood my obsession. We joined forces, poring over old records and interviewing townspeople. Together, we formed a bond, sharing our fears and theories late into the night. He told me of a ritual, an ancient pact made with the unkindness, which allowed the Blackwoods to amass great wealth, power, and influence. But with each generation, the family became more depraved, their rituals darker, their sacrifices more numerous. Finally, William had pieced together the events leading to the disappearance of my tenants. According to legend, after a year, the ritual reached its climax. The unkind demanded a final sacrifice, the life force of a Blackwood heir. But there was a twist. The heir had the option to choose who would replace them in the ritual, a family member, a friend, perhaps someone from the town. They could offer up someone dear or a stranger. In exchange, the heir would be granted immortality, trapped within the manor for eternity. Each month, when a new tenant moved in, they unknowingly took their place in the ritual. After 30 days, they were either offered up as a sacrifice or chose someone to take their place, continuing the cycle of death and despair. As we stood in the center of the manor, surrounded by centuries of darkness, I realized the truth. The house didn't want souls, it craved control. It wanted to maintain its existence by binding souls to its will, turning them into its pawns. I confronted William, demanding answers, but his response chilled me to the bone. There was no escape. We were trapped in a nightmare, doomed to repeat the cycle of sacrifice and servitude. Desperation gnawed at me. I searched frantically for a way out, clinging to the belief that somewhere there was an answer, a way to break the curse. Days turned into weeks, and my sanity began to slip. William, once my ally, grew distant, lost in his own thoughts. Had the house already claimed him? Then, amidst the chaos, a glimmer of hope. An old book, half hidden in the library, whispered of a way to sever the ties between the manor and the unkind. But the solution was perilous, requiring a sacrifice of equal value to the one taken by the manor. I struggled with the choice, torn between my own fate and that of the innocent people held captive by the manor. Could I risk everything to save them? Or would I be consumed by the darkness like those before me? With trembling hands, I followed the ritual instructions, preparing for the ultimate confrontation. The house groaned around me, sensing the end of its reign of terror. As the unkind stirred within the walls, I knew there was no turning back. The choice was made. The sacrifice was ready. Now I must face the darkness and confront the nightmares that have haunted Blackwood Manor for generations. My journey to expose the secrets of Blackwood Manor took me through a labyrinth of deceit, sacrifice, and unimaginable horror. As I delved deeper into the mysteries of the house, I uncovered a legacy of darkness that threatened to consume me. From the eerie disappearance of the Miller family to the chilling tales of the unkind, each clue brought me closer to the truth. I faced the possibility that Blackwood Manor held more than just a tragic history. It was a prison for souls, a gateway to unspeakable horrors. The horrifying reality of the monthly ritual shook me to my core. To be trapped in an endless cycle of fear and despair, offering up innocent lives to appease an ancient evil. The weight of this discovery pressed heavily upon me, demanding action. Fueled by determination, I sought to break the curse that plagued the manor. But the path to freedom was fraught with danger. The house fought back, testing my resolve and tempting me with visions of power and immortality. In the depths of my struggle, I found solace in the companionship of William Hayes. Together, we navigated the treacherous waters of the occult, uncovering secrets that bound us to the manor's fate. As the story reached its climax, I realized the true extent of the sacrifice required to break the curse. Torn between my own safety and the lives of those trapped by the manor, I faced an agonizing choice. But in the end, my compassion for the innocent victims of Blackwood Manor drove me forward. With unwavering resolve, I confronted the darkness head-on, ready to face the horrors that awaited me. Now, with the fate of Blackwood Manor hanging in the balance, I braced myself for the final showdown. Can I vanquish the unkind and liberate the trapped souls? Or will I succumb to the darkness that has consumed Blackwood Manor for centuries? Only time will tell if I can break the curse and restore peace to the tormented souls held captive by Blackwood Manor. Will humanity prevail against the forces of darkness, or will it fall prey to the insatiable hunger of the unkind? Join me as I continue my fight for freedom, justice, and survival. Stay tuned for the next installment of this spine-chilling tale. Don't miss out on the next chapter of Blackwood Manor. Welcome back to The Haunted Voice. I see these lights most nights now. They seem to pulse with a rhythm all their own, thrumming beneath the surface of things like some great leviathan's heartbeat. Sometimes I can feel the bass notes vibrating through my very bones. Other times the colors pulse, in time with my blood. This house is no longer mine. It's hers. And if I don't follow the rules, well, I don't want to think about what happens. I'm just glad she hasn't ripped the roof off yet. We have an agreement, sort of, and it helps, I guess. A little. We keep our distance mostly. I bring them food. Sometimes I hear her sing, and I keep quiet. Most days I bury myself in work. There's a certain freedom being deaf grants. No one bothers to speak to me unless they need something. Silence becomes a blanket, hiding me, protecting me. It works until it doesn't. She grows impatient. Says I haven't brought enough, says I should be more proactive. Says it's time for me to join them. She calls it joining the chorus. I call it torture. But I don't want to upset her. She's volatile. And right now, she's in a good mood. At least that's what she told me. Said it while licking her chops like a cat, staring at the tomatoes ripening on the vine. I'd planted them near the window, the ones I didn't pick. I knew what she wanted. I still had plenty in the house. Tomatoes grow like crazy here. You can harvest twice a season. The first crop turns out big and meaty. The second crop is sour and dry, but they're fine. She's fine, as long as you give her what she wants. As long as you give them what they want. I could still make it through the day. Ignored the new scratch marks on the pantry door. I knew she wouldn't be happy, but what choice did I have? I needed to concentrate. Work filled my mind, helping me forget. Letting her do her thing. That was my survival strategy. Ignoring the terror that gnawed at my gut. Not thinking about how her and her kind scoured the pantry bare. Oh, how hungry they were. How they loved the taste of earthly foods. Things like tomatoes, and the feeling of power surged through me as I wrote. As I crafted worlds where I mattered, where I could scream, and someone would listen. I used to read ghost stories online. Now I write them. Sort of, just don't tell anyone. My real readers wouldn't appreciate the change. I told myself it was better. That way, I could honor my gift. Create worlds instead of reading them. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The truth is, I wanted to escape. Escape from the scratching at the walls, the thumping on the ceiling, the steady drip of saliva hitting the floor. Drip, drip, drip. I couldn't focus anymore. I went downstairs to try to sleep, but the lullaby of their feasting echoed in my ears. Their voices sounded like chains dragging across stone. More berries, Shia sighed. The juicy ones. I went to the pantry, my hands shaking. I gathered up the baskets of blueberries, my fingers brushing against icy flesh. They called it winterberries. Said they tasted sweeter on earth. It was true. Our winters were mild. The blueberries froze solid, trapped in time. The rest stayed warm. I carried the baskets upstairs, laid them on the floor beside the bed. Shia watched me with unnerving intensity. Her kind tend to hover, meander, take a keen interest in the objects you own. They don't steal or vandalize. Not really, not on purpose. But they push, knock things over, leave greasy fingerprints on the walls. And they say sorry, and always lying. Thank you, little one, she purred, plunging her claws into a plump berry. The juice ran down her chin, staining her gray skin a deeper shade of charcoal. I see you struggle with the connection, but you must learn to let go. I forced a smile. Sure, how could I tell her I already had? I'd given up on everything. On everyone, on this world. And it hadn't helped. My phone was dead. No signal out here. Solar panels were my only option, but they weren't enough. So my laptop battery died long ago. No internet, no news, no calls for help. I am truly alone. And in a way, I suppose that's what I wanted. I didn't realize what I was missing. Family, friends, lovers, they faded into blurry memories. Faces blurred and drifted away like smoke in the wind. I tried not to think about them. Tried to focus on the silence, on the work, on not going insane. But the silence never brought peace, only menace. And the work, it mocked me. And as for going insane, well, maybe that's where I am now. Maybe I am insane. But insanity, I've heard, is relative. Ask any psychiatrist. I couldn't find one out here anyway. I'm sure she'll visit soon. With them all, they love to feast. To watch me work, to listen to me scream. So Shia said, jumping down from the bed, when will you join us? We can sing together. She always asks that. Doesn't matter how many times I refuse, how many times I say no. She keeps asking. Like a song, her song. Her tone is softer now, gentle. The colors outside are dimmer. The lights dance slower, sadder. I've noticed lately they prefer the evening now. The sun dips below the horizon, the woods darken, and the light show begins. They drift closer, closer, closer. I can hear them shifting in the trees, coiling and uncoiling like enormous snakes. Every rustle of leaves is a threat, every snap of a twig, a warning. And I fear the night when the wall won't hold, when their claws will rip through wood and plaster and flesh, when they'll pour into my house and drag me away. Or maybe that's just the story my brain tells. It's easier to hide in daytime. The scratching is quieter. The silence isn't so heavy. And they're gone, away, anywhere but here. I breathe easier then. But it's only a matter of time before they claim me entirely. And I wish I could explain the terror that grips me. The constant dread that coils in my gut. The knowledge that I'm not alone. And yet I'm utterly, terrifyingly alone. That even if I screamed, no one would hear me. No one would come. That the only solace I have is the thin veneer of sanity. And even that is wearing thin. I live on borrowed time. Until they take everything, until they take me. And I wonder sometimes if that's what peace sounds like. Hey there folks, it's me. Welcome to my channel. A lot of people think of AI as a modern development, and it is. In many ways, the tools we have today are exponentially more powerful than what we had even 10 years ago. But really, the field itself isn't that young at all. In fact, it's almost a century old. This year, on July 1923, the world's first computer was activated in Alta, California. A Mark I, a half-century before the personal computer, before laptops, tablets, even before integrated circuits. The first mechanical computing device was born. It's hard to overstate the impact this machine, lovingly nicknamed the Beast by its creators, had on the future of technology. The problem is, nobody knows it exists. Hidden away in the basement of a public school, this relic is coated in dust, forgotten and ignored. For nearly 100 years, it sat dormant until now. Today, you and I are going to bring this machine back online. We'll learn exactly what it did, why it was abandoned, and what the implications might be for the future of our channel. Let's get to work. I'm a historian, and this is my channel. This first episode in our series will focus on tracking down and rediscovering the Mark I. Subsequent episodes will see us bringing it back online and learning what secrets it holds. Now, despite being one of the most important machines of the modern era, there's surprisingly little to see or learn about the Mark I online. At UCLA's Young Research Library, they hold a wealth of primary source material regarding the early days of computers, including letters, engineering documents, blueprints, and schematics, photos, correspondence, even film footage of the machine itself. One of these films is labeled the Punch Card Ballet, a clever name highlighting how early programmers interacted with the machine via punch cards. The Mark I had no keyboard or user interface. Programmers punched holes into a deck of cards to tell the machine what to do. These punch cards were then fed into a reading mechanism that recorded the patterns of holes as binary data. Despite the seeming simplicity of this process, it required an intimate familiarity with the machine and a great deal of trial and error. Watch how delicately the programmer handles the cards and the machine. Every action has to be precise, every step calculated. In a way, the process of programming the Mark I was a kind of dance. But that's a lot of work, especially compared to the click of a keyboard. Our first step is going to be finding a machine in need of restoration. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of options. Only about a dozen Mark I's were ever built, and those are accounted for. 4 remain operational. 5 are held in museums, and 2, we believe, exist in private collections. That leaves us with a couple possibilities. Our best chance might be eBay, where several non-functional Mark I's have come up for sale in the past few years. I'm hoping to find a seller willing to work with me to make this machine operational, but it's going to take some work. If you follow the history of computers, you might be wondering, how does this machine compare to other contemporary systems? Well, let's consider what was happening in the world of mathematics at the time. The Mark I was built during the heyday of mathematical research. Physicists were discovering new laws of the universe, and they needed tools to calculate their theories. They hired mathematicians to help, and those mathematicians demanded better tools. The Mark I, while enormously complex, wasn't up to the task. Its most advanced calculations were limited to 6 decimal places. By comparison, the modern iPhone can handle numbers with thousands of digits of precision. Another comparison is the ENIAC, another pioneer in the field of computers. The Mark I was more complex and easier to program, but the ENIAC could achieve far more in the realm of number crunching. While the Mark I was retired by the late 60s, the ENIAC was cutting edge into the 80s. As far as hardware goes, the Mark I was fairly simple. It used vacuum tubes for processing, a rudimentary sort of CPU, and featured 2,300 of them. By comparison, your phone has about 4 billion transistors, not to mention an array of graphics processors that would have boggled the minds of the Mark I's engineers. The Mark I was not the first programmable machine, nor was it the first general-purpose computer, but it was the first fully automatic digital calculator, and that distinction launched 1,000 careers and changed the course of history. The code written for the Mark I helped scientists develop the first nuclear weapons. During World War II, The Mark I was donated to the war effort and shipped across the country to the Moore School of Electrical Engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. It was there that the Mark I's legacy was secured. The engineers and mathematicians stationed at the Moore School used the Mark I to develop the first high-level programming language and the first compiler, effectively laying the foundation for modern software engineering. By the end of the war, the Mark
I know it sounds strange, maybe even grotesque, but when you're an out-of-work actress in Texas, strange pays better than waiting tables. I didn't start out thinking this would be my life. There was a time I was chasing auditions, doing regional theater, TV commercials, or the occasional student film. I thought I could make it. But after a year of silence, of waiting by the phone, of hoping for a call that never came, my savings ran out. I had to move home. And that's when a Craigslist ad found me. Mourners wanted. Must show emotion on cue. Cash paid same day. I showed up at Kendry and Sons Funeral Services not knowing what to expect. The building was squat and brick, tucked between a payday loan office and a shuttered convenience store. The neon sign outside buzzed weakly, the kind of flicker that makes your eyes hurt. There weren't any sons. Just Kendry, a thin, gaunt man with skin like parchment, gray eyes that never quite focused, and a smell of bleach and smoke that seemed to cling to him. He didn't smile. He didn't ask me questions. He just handed me a folded sheet with the time of the service and said, "You show up, you cry, you don't ask questions." Families want to feel their loved one mattered. That's where you come in. The first funeral was awkward. A woman in her 70s. Cancer. Her children gathered around, whispering to one another, hugging her pictures, patting the casket. I sat near the front, holding a tissue, trying not to overdo it, trying to get the crying right without looking ridiculous. My chest ached and the tears came slowly at first, then faster, until my face was damp and my hands shaking from holding the tissue. It felt wrong, but also strangely satisfying. I was helping in a small way, making the grief feel fuller, less empty. It was a long first day, but as we were wrapping up, Kendry handed me an envelope of cash. I felt something I hadn't felt in months, relief. After a few more funerals, I started getting used to the rhythm. Arrive, stand near the front, sit, dab at my eyes, offer comfort when a family member came close. People thanked me politely, sometimes with a hug, sometimes with a hand on my shoulder. I didn't know the deceased, but that didn't matter. I didn't ask questions. Kendry never did. Some days it still felt wrong. My chest would tighten when I saw the casket or when someone's wailing echoed down the small hall. Sometimes I felt like I shouldn't be there at all, like an intruder in someone else's grief. But most of the time, the money was enough to drown that feeling out. I started noticing things, not about the funerals themselves, but about the routine. How Kendry moved quietly between rooms, checking the schedule, adjusting flowers, making notes. How the same cleaning crew appeared early every morning, sweeping and dusting, even when no one had requested it. And then there was the man. Tall, thin, always standing across the street, just beyond the windows, smoking or shifting his weight from foot to foot. He never came inside. He never spoke. Just watched. I tried to tell myself he was a neighbor or just some loner, but he was there again and again. I started paying him less attention. I had to focus on the crying, the tissues, the comfort. It was exhausting. The hours were long, the rooms warm and still, the smell of flowers heavy in the air. I began to sink into the routine, almost forgetting the man outside entirely. Weeks passed, the pattern continued. I was getting used to the motions, the faces, the quiet expectations. Some funerals were chaotic, messy, loud. Others were quieter, smaller. But I didn't think much about it. I did my job. I cried. I offered comfort. I took the money. There were people from all walks of life at these funerals. There were rangers, judges, athletes, heck, even some even worked in the circus. but I'll never forget meeting a doctor. A few polite words, nothing dramatic, but he was so slick, so well-spoken. I remembered his handsome face like it was my job. Something about him felt too precise, too calm, but I didn't think much of it. A week later, I saw him again on a television commercial for Arby's. Grinning, perfect teeth, same face, same voice. I froze. My stomach dropped. He'd been at the funeral, crying politely, offering condolences, sitting there like a part of a family. He wasn't a doctor. He was just like me, an actor. If he had been pretending, that meant everyone else in that sparse room could have been paid to be there as well. I went back through every strange funeral in my head, the stiff body language, the rehearsed lines, the way nobody ever asked who I was or who anyone else was. That's when it hit me. Some funerals were entirely fake. Every person in the room, an actor. The bodies were real, but the grief was staged. The next few days, I went to work as usual, but the fake funerals kept running through my head. Something about them didn't sit right. I found myself watching the guests more closely, noting little details I'd ignored before, the way some of them exchanged glances when they thought no one was looking, the way the caskets were always sealed, the way Kendry's hands lingered on the lids just a second too long. I started checking the names online, obituaries, GoFund pages, social media, nothing. It was like these people had never existed outside the funeral home. Then I noticed the tall man again, standing in his usual corner across the street, watching, not observing the funeral home in general. He was watching those particular services, the quiet ones with only a handful of attendees. His attention was focused, precise, and slowly, piece by piece, it dawned on me, he wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't a distant relative. He was the reason the funerals existed. The quiet services, the missing records, Kendry's meticulous handling of the bodies, all of it revolved around him. The tall man had killed the people in those caskets. That's why no one else knew them. That's why the grief had to be manufactured. He wanted the ritual for himself, and Kendry was his enabler, paid to take care of the bodies, to prepare the cremations, to keep the rest of the world from asking questions. My stomach turned. Every tear I had shed, every comforting word I had offered, every tissue I had dabbed at my eyes, it had been part of his game, part of his sick ritual. I realized then that I had been playing my part in a killer's theater, and that the man outside wasn't just watching. He was orchestrating it all, enjoying it from his vantage point across the street, entirely removed from the rest of the world. I felt sick. Every tear I shed was helping someone disappear. I quit the next morning, told Kendry I couldn't do it anymore. He didn't argue, just gave me a flat smile, like he'd been waiting for me to say it. I'm going to the cops tomorrow, going to fix this all up, but tonight's been strange. I feel like I've heard strange noises coming from outside my place. A few times I could swear I even saw the tall man. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. I'm just worried I know what comes next. They'll have to hire actors to cry for me.
My name is Alex, and I'm a realtor. Or, I used to be. Now I'm just hiding. It all started with a house. Not just any house. This one was different. It sat at the very end of a long, lonely road called Whisperwood Lane. The name sounded nice, like a place from a fairy tale, but there was nothing nice about it. The house was old, made of dark wood that looked gray under the cloudy sky. It had 2 floors, big windows that looked like empty eyes, and a wide front porch with a single rocking chair. The trees of the forest grew right up to the backyard, their branches like long, bony fingers reaching for the roof. It was completely isolated, miles from the nearest neighbor. I took the job because I needed the money. Business was slow and my bills were piling up. My job was simple: find tenants for the house on Whisperwood Lane. The owner wanted someone to live there for at least a month. 1 month. That was the magic number. I didn't understand why, but the pay was too good to ask too many questions. I was supposed to collect the rent, check on the property, and make sure everything was in order. It sounded like the easiest job in the world. But from the very beginning, something felt wrong. Every time I drove up that long, quiet lane, a shiver would run down my spine. The air grew colder and the world seemed to hold its breath. The house itself was always clean, too clean. It was fully furnished with old dark furniture, a big dining table, a sofa covered in a white sheet, and beds with perfectly made blankets. But there was no dust, not a single speck. It was like no one had ever lived there, or maybe someone was cleaning it constantly when I wasn't around. The strangest part was the feeling inside. It was a heavy, silent feeling, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that listens. I would walk through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floors, and I always felt like I was being watched by the house itself. My main task was to show the house to potential renters. I tried to make it sound appealing. Look at this amazing view of the forest. It's so peaceful and private here, a perfect escape from the noisy city. People were often interested because the rent was surprisingly low for such a big place. I would walk them through the chilly rooms, forcing a smile on my face. But deep down I felt like I was lying. I was selling them a dream, but I had a growing fear that it was actually a nightmare. And soon, I would learn just how terrible that nightmare could be. The job came to me in a very unusual way. I didn't find an ad online or in the newspaper, it found me. One rainy Tuesday, the phone in my small office rang. It was a number I didn't recognize with no caller ID. I almost didn't answer, but I was desperate for work. "Hello, Alex Carter Realty," I said, trying to sound professional. The voice on the other end was low and raspy, like stones grinding together. It was a man, but his voice was strange, almost metallic. He didn't say hello or introduce himself. He just said, "You are a realtor. You need a job. I have one for you." His words were slow and deliberate, and they sent a chill through me. He told me about the house on Whisperwood Lane. He said he was the owner, but he was very busy and lived far away. He needed someone local to manage it for him. He explained the duties: find a tenant, sign a 1-month lease, and that was it. He never told me his name. When I asked, he simply said, "Just call me the owner." He told me he would handle all payments in cash. He said a package would be delivered to my office, and I should use the money inside for my commission and the first month's deposit. I was skeptical. Who pays in cash without even meeting you? It was all very mysterious and a little bit scary. The next day, a plain brown box was sitting on my office doorstep. There was no return address. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, there were stacks of $100 bills, neatly wrapped in rubber bands. It was more money than I had seen in months. There was also a single old-fashioned iron key and a note. The note was written in elegant, spidery handwriting. It said, "This is your commission for the first 3 tenants. Find them quickly. Deposit the rent in this box and leave it on the porch on the 1st of each month. I will collect it." It felt like a deal with a ghost, a secret agreement that nobody else in the world knew about. Against my better judgment, I took the job. The money was too tempting to refuse. I told myself it was just an eccentric rich man who valued his privacy. I called the owner back on the strange number to confirm I had received the package. He didn't sound pleased or surprised. He just said, "Good, do not fail me. The house does not like to be empty." That last sentence stuck with me. The house does not like to be empty. What did that mean? It sounded like a threat, but I pushed the thought away. I had a job to do, and I was determined to do it right. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. My first tenants were a retired couple, the Hendersons. They were sweet gray-haired people who wanted a quiet place to spend a month away from their noisy grandchildren. They loved the house immediately. Mrs. Henderson admired the antique furniture, and Mr. Henderson was excited about the forest. He said he wanted to go for long walks and watch birds. They seemed perfect. They were quiet, respectful, and paid the rent on time with a cheerful smile. I gave them the iron key and watched them carry their 2 small suitcases inside. They waved at me from the porch as I drove away, looking happy and content in their new, temporary home. I checked in with them once, about a week later. I called their cell phone and Mrs. Henderson answered. She sounded happy. "Oh, it's just wonderful, Alex," she said. "It's so peaceful here. We haven't seen another soul. It's like we have the whole world to ourselves." She told me her husband was spending all his time in the woods, exploring the trails behind the house. I felt a sense of relief. Everything was going smoothly. The job was as easy as the owner had promised. I put the house out of my mind and focused on other things, happy to have the commission in my bank account. The month passed quickly. On the last day, I drove out to Whisperwood Lane to collect the key and inspect the property. I expected to see the Hendersons packing up their car, ready to leave. But when I arrived, their car was gone. The house was silent. I knocked on the front door, but there was no answer. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast quiet. I tried the doorknob, and it was unlocked. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was immaculate, the beds were made, the floors were clean, and the sheet was back on the sofa. There was no sign that anyone had lived there at all. I searched the entire house. All their things were gone, their suitcases, their clothes, their books, even the half-eaten box of cookies Mrs. Henderson had on the kitchen counter. It was as if they had never been there. I checked the closets, the drawers, everything. It was all empty. I thought it was strange that they left without saying goodbye or leaving the key. but I figured they were just in a hurry. I found the key sitting on the kitchen table, right in the center. I locked the door, feeling a little unsettled. I called their phone later that day, but it went straight to voicemail. I never heard from them again. A few weeks later, I found my second tenants. They were a young couple, both writers named Sarah and Ben. They thought the isolated house was the perfect place to work on their novels without distractions. They were excited by the story of the house, its age, and its remote location. "This place has so much atmosphere," Sarah had said, her eyes wide with inspiration. "I can already feel the ideas flowing." Ben nodded in agreement, taking pictures of the dark woods with his phone. They were full of creative energy and optimism. They moved in with 2 laptops, 3 boxes of books, and a coffee machine they said they couldn't live without. Just like with the Hendersons, I called them after about a week to see how they were settling in. Ben answered the phone, and he sounded a bit different from when I had met him. His voice was tired. He said the house was a little too quiet and that the silence was making it hard to concentrate. He mentioned that Sarah was having trouble sleeping. She kept saying she heard strange noises at night, like whispers coming from the forest. I tried to reassure him, telling him it was probably just the wind in the trees. He didn't sound convinced. The call left me with a small, cold knot of worry in my stomach. At the end of their month, the same thing happened. I drove to the house on the last day of their lease, and their car was gone. The house was still and silent, looking just as it had before they arrived. I knocked, then called out their names, but only the echo of my own voice answered me. The door was unlocked again. I stepped inside, and my heart began to beat a little faster. It was exactly the same as with the Hendersons. The house was perfectly clean, the beds were made, and the furniture was all in its proper place. There was no sign of Sarah or Ben. Their laptops, their boxes of books, even their precious coffee machine, all gone. It was more than just strange now, it was deeply disturbing. 2 sets of tenants had now vanished without a trace, leaving the house in an unnaturally pristine state. The iron key was sitting in the exact same spot on the kitchen table. I picked it up and it felt cold in my hand. I walked through the silent rooms, the feeling of being watched stronger than ever before. I tried calling Sarah and Ben, but their phones were turned off. I sent them emails, but I never got a reply. They had simply disappeared, swallowed up by the silence of Whisperwood Lane. I knew I should have stopped then. I should have called the police. But I didn't. My fear was growing, but so was my need for money. The owner had called me again, his raspy voice seeming to come from a great distance. "The house is empty," he said. It wasn't a question. "Find another tenant." I hesitated, but the thought of that cash waiting for me pushed my doubts away, so I put the ad up again. A few days later, a man called. He said his name was Julian. He wanted to see the house immediately. When he arrived for the viewing, I felt a jolt of unease. He was a pale, thin man, maybe in his late 20s, with dark tattoos covering his neck and arms. He wore a large silver ring in his ear that glinted in the dim light. Julian didn't say much as I showed him the house. He just walked through the rooms with a slow, deliberate pace. His eyes, which were a very light blue, seemed to look past the furniture and through the walls. He didn't care about the kitchen or the bedrooms. He was only interested in one thing, the view from the back porch. He stood there for a long time, staring out at the dense, dark forest. "I need to get away from my past," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on the trees. "This is good. This is quiet. I love the view." He agreed to rent it on the spot, pulling a thick wad of cash from his pocket to pay for the month. I felt a new level of dread as I handed him the iron key. There was something about him, a strange calmness that seemed out of place. He didn't have much baggage, just one large duffel bag that he slung over his shoulder. He told me not to bother him. He said he wanted to be left completely alone for the entire month. He wanted no calls, no visits. "I'll leave the key on the table when I'm done," he said, as if he already knew the routine. As I left, I saw him go back out to the porch, sit in the old rocking chair, and stare into the forest as if he were waiting for someone. 2 weeks went by, not the full month, just 2 weeks. I couldn't stop thinking about Julian and the house. His request for complete isolation made me more nervous, not less. I fought the urge to call him every day. Then one morning I had a feeling, a terrible sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I knew something was wrong. I drove out to Whisperwood Lane, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. His old, beat-up car was gone. I walked up to the silent house, my heart pounding against my ribs. I didn't even bother to knock. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, preparing myself for the familiar, chilling emptiness. And that's exactly what I found. Everything was gone. This time, the emptiness felt different. It was heavier, more final. The house was spotless, of course. The floors shone, the furniture was perfectly arranged, and the air was still and cold. But Julian had only been here for 2 weeks. It hadn't even been a full month. The pattern was broken, and that scared me more than anything. I walked through the silent rooms, my footsteps the only sound. I checked the bedroom he had used. The bed was made with military precision. The closet was empty. I looked in the bathroom. The counter was wiped clean. There wasn't a single hair, a drop of water, or a forgotten toothbrush. He had vanished completely. I started to panic. This wasn't normal. People don't just disappear. Not 3 times in a row. Not from the same house. The Hendersons, Sarah and Ben, and now Julian. All of them gone, along with every single one of their belongings. It was as if the house itself was erasing them, wiping away any evidence that they had ever existed within its walls. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I was the one who brought them here. I had taken the owner's strange money and ignored all the warning signs. These people's disappearances were my fault. I was an accomplice to whatever terrible thing was happening in this place. The silence of the house was deafening. I stood in the living room looking at the pristine furniture and the dust-free surfaces. It was a stage, perfectly set for the next act, the next victim, and I was the one who said it. I remembered the owner's words, "The house does not like to be empty." Was this what he meant? Did the house consume people? The idea was insane, but what was the alternative? That 3 separate sets of tenants had all decided to secretly move out in the middle of the night, leaving no trace and never contact me again? That seemed even more impossible. The house was the only constant, the house was the problem. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. I thought about the owner, the raspy voice on the phone, the cash deliveries. He knew what was happening here. He had to. He wasn't just an eccentric landlord, he was part of this whole nightmare. I looked for the key, and just like before, it was sitting on the kitchen table. I picked it up, but this time I didn't leave. I couldn't. The cycle had to stop. I couldn't let anyone else move into this house. I had to figure out what was going on, even if it meant putting myself in danger. The pattern of emptiness had to be broken. A few days later, a young couple called me. They had a baby. They saw my ad and said the house on Whisperwood Lane sounded perfect for their little family. They wanted to escape the city for a month. Hearing the sound of the baby cooing over the phone made my blood run cold. I couldn't do it. I couldn't lead them to this place. I imagined their small, happy family being erased, their laughter replaced by this horrible, listening silence. I told them I would call them back, and then hung up the phone, my hand shaking. That night I decided I had to go back to the house. I had to find something, anything, that could explain what was happening. I drove down Whisperwood Lane under the black, moonless sky. The forest on either side of the road was a wall of impenetrable darkness. I parked my car a short distance away and walked the rest of the way, my flashlight beam cutting a nervous path in front of me. The house looked even more menacing at night, a dark shape against the slightly less dark sky. I used the iron key to unlock the door, the sound echoing loudly in the dead quiet. I stepped inside, my flashlight sweeping across the clean, empty rooms. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and I had to fight the urge to run back to my car. I searched the house from top to bottom looking for anything out of place. I pulled back the sheets on the furniture, looked under the beds, and checked inside every cabinet. Nothing. It was as perfect and empty as ever. Then I remembered Julian. He loved the porch. He spent his time sitting in that old wooden rocking chair, staring into the woods. I went outside, the damp night air clinging to my skin. The rocking chair was still, waiting. I ran my flashlight over it, examining every inch of the wood. At first I saw nothing, but then, my light caught a tiny glint of silver. Stuck in a crack between the seat and the armrest was a piece of jewelry. It was Julian's large, silver ear piercing. My heart leaped into my throat. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to the silver ring was something small, pale, and grotesque. It was a piece of an ear. It was rotten and bloody, and I felt sick to my stomach. I stumbled back, dropping my flashlight. As I bent down to pick it up, its beam slid across the floorboards under the chair. There, carved deep into the wood, was a strange symbol. It was a circle with a jagged line through it, something ancient and evil. I had found my evidence, but I had also found something much worse. I stared at the symbol, horrified. It looked like something from a nightmare, a mark of pure evil. My mind was reeling. The ear, the piercing, the symbol. This was proof. This was real. This wasn't just a series of strange coincidences. Something violent and terrible had happened here. Julian hadn't just left. He was taken. He was a victim of whatever dark power resided in this place, a power that demanded a price, a sacrifice. And the symbol felt like its signature, a brand marking its territory. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones, a fear so intense it was hard to breathe. I had to get out of there. I had to get to the police. Just as I stood up, a sound drifted from the forest. It was faint at first, and for a moment I thought I was imagining it. It was laughter, a low, chuckling sound. It wasn't a happy sound. It was cruel and mocking, filled with a terrible glee. It sounded like it was coming from deep within the woods, but it was growing louder, closer. The laughter echoed through the silent night, bouncing off the trees surrounding the house. It was the sound of something inhuman, something ancient and hungry, and it knew I was there. It was the sound of the thing that had taken the Hendersons and Sarah and Ben and Julian. Panic seized me. I scrambled backward, away from the porch, away from the woods. The laughter grew louder and louder, a chorus of insane joy that seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. It was inside my head, clawing at my sanity. I didn't wait for another second. I turned and ran. I fled through the house, not daring to look behind me. I burst out the front door and sprinted down the driveway toward my car, my lungs burning. The laughter followed me, chasing me, nipping at my heels. It was a wild, terrible sound that promised a horrible end. I felt like if it touched me, I would be torn apart. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. The laughter was right outside the car now, a deafening roar of malicious delight. I jammed the key into the ignition and floored the gas pedal. The tires screamed on the gravel as I sped away from the house on Whisperwood Lane, my eyes wide with terror. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I couldn't. I just drove as fast as I could away from the darkness, away from the house, and away from that awful, endless laughter. The next morning, I went to the police. I was a mess. I hadn't slept, and the sound of the laughter was still ringing in my ears. I told them everything. I told them about the owner, the cash, the disappearing tenants, and what I had found on the porch, the ear, the piercing, and the symbol. I probably sounded crazy, but I didn't care. I showed them the address on Whisperwood Lane. 2 officers went to investigate the house. I waited at the station for hours, pacing back and forth, my nerves completely shot. I expected them to come back with evidence to confirm my story. When they returned, their faces were blank. They said they had found nothing. The house was clean. There was no rocking chair on the porch. There was no bloody ear piercing, no rotten piece of flesh, and no strange symbol carved into the wood. The floorboards were old but completely unmarked. They told me it was an empty, dusty old house and that I must have imagined it all. They said my story was unbelievable. They couldn't trace the owner's phone number, and without any evidence or missing persons reports, there was nothing they could do. They looked at me with suspicion, as if I were the one who was unstable. I left the station feeling defeated and more scared than ever. That afternoon, I called the couple with the baby. I told them the house was no longer available. I told them there was a plumbing issue, a foundation problem, any lie I could think of. I couldn't explain the truth, but I made sure they would never go near that place. Then my phone rang. It was the number with no caller ID. It was him. My heart stopped. I almost didn't answer, but I knew he would just keep calling. I shakily raised the phone to my ear. "The deal is off," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm not finding you any more tenants. Stay away from me." The owner's raspy voice was cold and sharp. There was no surprise in it, only anger. "A pact was made," he hissed. "The house must be fed. The rent is due." Then he said something that made my blood freeze in my veins. "If you cannot bring it a tenant, it will collect the rent from you." Then he laughed. It was the same horrible, mocking laughter I'd heard in the woods. It filled my ear, my head, my soul. I screamed and threw the phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. But I couldn't escape the sound. The pact would be enforced, the rent would be collected, and I was the only one left to pay it.
They told me the dead can't talk, but as I leaned over the cold body on the table, I swear I heard him whisper my name. The car lurched left around the mountain bend, and Amy instinctively gripped the handle above her head. Tyler snorted from the driver's seat. He had been trying to impress Lila, who was sitting in the back. Matthew leaned over from the back seat. "Dude, lay off the clutch. You're going to burn it out if you keep riding it down the hill." Lila groaned and sank into her chair. "Ugh, I'm bored." She kicked the seat in front of her. "Why couldn't we do something interesting like go to summer festival?" Amy laughed. "Because nobody else wants to go to some shitty music festival." Tyler switched on the radio. The speakers blared static. "Fuck." Amy grabbed the volume knob and spun it left, turning the noise down. "Sorry." Tyler pressed some buttons on the dashboard. After switching through several stations of different types of static, they landed on something that resembled speaking. "Oh, I think we have a winner." He pressed a few more buttons, and the speakers began playing what sounded like a religious radio station. "And the Lord provides for those who lose their way, brings them home to the fold. Yes, brings them to the family that waits." "Nope," Matt said, lurching across the middle of the car and switching the radio off. "No religious nightmares for me, thanks." "What are those things on the side of the road?" Lila pointed out the window at some wooden sticks, painted red, sticking out of the ground. "I keep seeing them randomly. Are they too I don't know, stop you from going off the road, or something?" "How would that stop you from going off the road?" Matt laughed. "Hey, don't laugh, bro. You don't know what it's for, either." Tyler grumbled. "Probably to mark where roadkill was," Amy said, her face pressed against the window. She noticed 6 more painted sticks on her side of the road, all in a line. "It is pretty fucking creepy though." She snorted. "Do you even know where we're going?" Matt asked, leaning his head back against the headrest and closing his eyes. "Of course I do, bro. I looked at the map like 60 times before we left. It's like, keep following this road until a roundabout, then left, and then like, ... Yeah, from there." After another half hour of driving, Tyler groaned loudly. "Ah shit," he slammed his hand against the steering wheel. "We're almost out of fucking gas." "Man," Amy lurched awake. She hadn't even realized she'd fallen asleep. "Wait, what? I thought we filled up like an hour ago." "That was more like 3 hours ago," Lila said, picking at her nails. "Fucking hell. Tyler, haven't you been paying attention?" Matt called from the back seat. "I have, I just thought it was like ... Tyler's voice trailed off. "Look," Amy's eyes widened, and she pointed at a sign coming up. "GAS, 2 miles" was written in red spray paint on a wooden fence post leaning against a tree. "Hey, maybe that religious stuff, like, helped us or something." Lila smirked. Up ahead, they saw a dingy old gas station that looked like it had been neglected for decades. The awning was drooping on one side, and the sides of the building were overgrown with tangled trees and tall grass. The windows were covered in grime, and aggressive weeds sprouted from the concrete between the gas pumps. Oh, fucking great, it's abandoned. Tyler slammed his hand against the wheel, causing the car to lurch slightly. Jesus, man, fucking stop doing that, Matt yelled. Amy looked up at the dark sky. The sun had started to set, and the last rays of light were abandoning them over the hills. Great, just fucking great. We're out of gas, and it's almost fucking nighttime. Lila leaned forward. Hey guys, when's the last time we've seen a car? I don't think I've seen one pass in hours. Matt groaned and rubbed his face with his hands. Look, we'll pull over and maybe like. There's still fuel in the pumps, Tyler said, a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice. They pulled into the station, and the car shuddered over the sharp change of terrain. Tyler stopped next to a pump and looked at the others before climbing out. Amy and Matt climbed out next, groaning and stretching almost in unison. Matt leaned down and poked his head into the car. Are you coming out? Lila looked around nervously before opening the door and shuffling out. No dice. Tyler pulled the trigger of the gas pump several times to no avail. That's just great. Amy kicked a rock, and it bounced off the old building. Should we see if there's a phone inside or something? Lila asked, creeping closer to Tyler. Amy was already at the window. She wiped a thick layer of dust and dirt off with her jacket sleeve and pressed her forehead against the glass, struggling to see inside. Matt walked over and tried the door, but it was securely chained from the inside with a padlock. Tyler and Lila wandered over, and Tyler picked up a chunk of concrete he'd found. Whoa, what the fuck are you doing? Amy gasped. I'm gonna break the window so we can climb in. He shrugged. What if it's not abandoned? Lila said quietly. They all turned and stared at her. Yeah, sorry. She looked at the ground. Tyler threw the chunk of concrete. It shattered the window, flew halfway inside, and smashed into a shelf, causing it to crash to the ground. The noise echoed around them, and a few nearby birds flew off. See, easy peasy, Tyler said, beaming, as he climbed through the broken window. They poked their heads inside, watching Tyler walk into the darkness, using his phone as a flashlight. Do you see a phone? Lila called out. No answer. Tyler, Amy yelled into the building. Still nothing. Fucking hell, Matt said, climbing into the building. If he's been murdered, I swear to God. Amy looked at Lila. I'm going in too. Are you coming? Lila rubbed her arms nervously. No, I think I'll wait here, in case someone comes past and they can, help us. Amy stared at her for a second, then shrugged and climbed in after Matt. Matt pulled out his phone and turned on his flashlight, scanning the room. Tyler, he called out shakily. Tyler, stop fucking around and come out. Amy called past him. They walked further in, stepping over fallen shelving. The roof had caved in, leaving a gaping hole in the ceiling. Amy walked into the back of Matt while staring up at the sky through the hole. Oh, sorry, she apologized, looking back down and stopping. Matt was staring at something she couldn't see. Tyler, is that you? Matt called out into the darkness, raising his flashlight. Tyler was standing in the doorway of what looked like some kind of storage room. He wasn't moving, just standing with his back to them. Dude, what the fuck? Amy whispered. Matt approached slowly, extending his arm and putting his hand on Tyler's shoulder. Hey Tyler. Tyler whipped around in a blur, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. I'm going to kill you. Holy fuck. Matt fell backward into Amy, crashing on top of her. Tyler burst out laughing, doubling over. You're such a fucking dickhead, Amy screamed. Matt jumped up and shoved Tyler, who was still laughing. Your fucking face. Tyler wheezed from laughing so hard. Fucking golden. Are you okay? Matt said, helping Amy to her feet. Yeah, I'm okay. She brushed dirt off herself. Just ... What the fuck? There's actually some cool shit back here. Guys. There's someone coming. Lila called from the window. They turned and ran to the window. A pair of headlights was slowly getting bigger. An old beat-up truck pulled into the service station behind Tyler's car. One by one, they jumped out of the window and watched as a large man, possibly in his late 40s, with a thick gray beard and wearing a filthy old trucker's hat, stepped out. Hiya, I noticed your car parked here and thought that maybe y'all need some help. His accent was thick and noticeably southern. He glanced behind them and gave a cartoonish wince. Y'all did a number on that there poor window. He walked toward them slowly. I used to know the fella who ran this station. Nice guy, didn't sit right with me what they did to him. Amy looked at Matt, who looked at Tyler. Do you have gas? My car is empty. The man stopped in front of them and sighed, long and drawn out. Sheesh. Well, I didn't think to bring any with me, considering I didn't know I was gonna stumble onto y'all. He extended a grubby hand to Tyler. My name is Abraham. It's a pleasure to meet y'all. Tyler shook his hand. Abraham held it long and hard. Can you drive us back to the city? Matt piped up from behind Tyler. gosh, well, the city is about a couple hours, ... He pointed in a direction, then spun around and put his hand on his head. I'm afraid I can't drive that far out. I gots to get home to the wife and kids. You know how it is. He looked at them for a second. But I guess I can't leave a couple of kids out here in the cold, after dark. No good can come from that. Oh no, the Lord will bless those who look after those in need. Amy gulped. Y'all can jump in the back. I got some game in there, so try not to disturb the tarp. Tyler looked at Lila, then at the other two. Matt shrugged, and Abraham put his arm around Tyler, ushering him to the passenger seat of the truck. They looked at each other nervously before shuffling behind him. Amy grabbed Matt's arm. Are we seriously going to this guy's house? She whispered. What choice do we have? He yanked his arm free. The three of them climbed into the back of the truck, stepping cautiously around the big lump in the middle, covered by the tarp. The truck rumbled to life, and Amy could see Abraham slap Tyler on the back and laugh through the rear window. After about 15 minutes of driving, the truck pulled off down a dirt road, through a winding path that seemed to get narrower and narrower, before stopping at an old metal gate. Abraham jumped out and yanked the gate open, dragging it until it was wide enough to fit the truck through. He jumped back in and drove through, then got back out and closed it. As he walked around the back of the truck, he slapped the side of it. We gonna be eating good tonight. The Lord has provided us with a meal. Then he got back in the truck. Lila shot Amy a look. She mouthed, what the fuck? Amy nodded. The truck drove up the path some more before pulling over next to an old wooden house. Its faded white paint peeled in strange places. A tin roof, mottled with rust, topped the structure. A narrow porch wrapped around the front, its floorboards warped with age. The entire house leaned slightly. A dim golden hue emanated from the windows. Abraham jumped out and walked around to the back of the truck. She's a beauty, ain't she? Belonged to my Mima and her grandpa before her. He took off his cap and ran a hand over his bald head. Tyler jumped out and stood on the other side of the truck. Amy and Lila looked at Matthew before Abraham opened the back of the truck and ushered them to get out. He led them up the steps to the house, the wooden floorboards feeling like they would snap at any moment. He opened the old wooden door, having to push it slightly as it got stuck halfway open. Honey, I'm home. He called out into the darkness. They followed behind him cautiously. Amy winced. The entire house smelled like rotting meat. Matt caught her gaze and nodded, scrunching his face. Where's your family? Tyler asked cautiously. Abraham stopped and turned around. My what? Wire. Abraham slapped him on the shoulder. Ah, I'm only screwing with ya. They're upstairs. Amy released the breath that had caught in her throat. He led them into a small kitchen. The wooden floor was covered in dark red stains. The only light came from an old oil lantern hanging on a nail in the corner. He pointed to an old, worn couch in the corner of another room. Go make yourselves at home. I'm gonna grab our supper out of the truck. He walked back out the front door, leaving them standing in the middle of the living room alone. We need to get the fuck out of here. Matt hissed, and go where? Tyler argued back. We're fucking stuck here. Footsteps creaked overhead, heavy and slow. What the fuck? Amy mouthed, guys, I'm like freaking out. Lila spoke up. Maybe he's just a little quirky. Tyler shrugged, but Amy could see he was just as terrified. Who's a little quirky? Abraham dropped a huge elk onto the kitchen table. We're just, I'm fucking with ya. Abraham chortled, I know my house looks a little strange. What with all the water damage? He took out a massive, rusted cleaver. Amy instinctively put her hand out in front of Lila. I know you folks are probably used to your fancy gadgets and nice floors and such. He buried the cleaver into the elk's neck, severing it in one clean motion. But trust me, it'll be like one of those digital detoxes. He wiped his now bloodied hands on his jeans. Big boy, come help me with this game here. He gestured for Tyler to come over. The ceiling groaned loudly. They all looked up. Abraham's eyes narrowed slightly. Y'all hang here. I'll be right back. He left the kitchen and ascended the stairs. Matt rushed over to the kitchen wall and took a knife off it, hiding it in the back of his jeans. Thump, something heavy hit the floor upstairs. Matt rushed back into place as Abraham came back down the stairs. Sorry about that, y'all, just the old ball and chai. He paused, staring at the wall. That's strange. One of my good knives seems to be missing. Amy shot Matt a worried look. Abraham walked over to the knife rack and traced his finger across the empty space where the knife had been. Shit, I'm losing my mind. Shit, I'm losing my mind. Anyway, he tossed the cleaver to Tyler, who barely caught it without cutting himself. I assume you know how to gut an elk. Boy, Tyler stood there awkwardly, holding the cleaver. You sickened, be that hard. He laughed nervously. All right, here, let me show you. Abraham grabbed Tyler's arm with one hand and held the elk with the other. He raised Tyler's hand over the midsection of the elk. You want to start right? He licked his lips. Here. Abraham guided Tyler's hand, almost forcefully, along the elk's skin, cutting into it. Lila turned away, scrunching her face. Amy gagged and winced. Matt stood watching, eyes wide, unable to move. Are your family going to join us for dinner? Matt interrupted. Abraham stopped and looked over at Matt. Why, of course, child. They need to eat, don't they? He smiled, revealing yellow, rotting teeth. He raised his chin to the ceiling and yelled, "Boys!" The sound of multiple footsteps could be heard descending the stairs quickly, and in the doorway, 2 young boys emerged. They were both short and skinny, with wild eyes and yellow teeth. Abraham walked over to one of the boys and stood behind him, putting one hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is Isaiah." Then he put his other hand on the other boy's shoulder. "And this is Elijah. Unnice to meet you," Matt said, nervousness creeping through his voice. They all stood there for a second in complete silence, staring at each other. "Well, let my boys show y'all where you'll be sleeping tonight." The 2 boys spun around and ran back up the stairs. "Well, go on then." Abraham gestured for them to follow the boys. "I'll be down here preparing supper for y'all." The group looked at each other nervously before Tyler took the lead and cautiously walked up the stairs. The stairs creaked and groaned softly as they ascended. The rotting smell got worse the further up they went, until they were in a small hallway with walls covered in peeling yellow wallpaper decorated with little painted flowers. Elijah and Isaiah were standing in a doorway at the end of the hallway. Nervously, they all followed the boys, walking past them into the small bedroom. Matt felt something touch his shirt and spun around. Isaiah was holding the knife he'd taken from the wall. "You're not supposed to have this. It belongs to PA." Matt's heart dropped. Amy turned and saw Isaiah running his fingers along the blade. Then Elijah whispered something in Isaiah's ear, and they both giggled and ran down the hallway. "Dude, we're so fucked," Matt said finally. Amy turned and saw Tyler trying to open the window. It squeaked loudly, and they could hear heavy footsteps on the stairs. "Quick," Amy gasped, shoving the window back down and pulling Tyler away from it. Abraham appeared in the hallway. His entire midsection was soaked in animal blood. "Supper is ready. Folks, if y'all want to follow me down." The group looked at each other before nervously following him. A groaning noise came from the door at the other end of the hallway. What was that?" Lila said quietly. Abraham stopped. "Now y'all just ignore that. My wife has been under the weather lately." He turned and looked at the group. "Never, and I mean never, go into that room. Do y'all understand me?" Amy felt her blood run cold. "Why, yes, sir." Abraham's lips peeled back into a toothy grin. "Good." They followed him down to the kitchen, where the table was set with tin plates, each filled with freshly cooked meat. Amy noticed the knife on the wall was still missing. She shot a glare at Matt, who noticed the same thing. He shrugged nervously. They all sat down, and Tyler went to start eating before Abraham slammed his hand down on the table. Everyone except for the 2 young boys jumped. Tyler's face went white. "Don't tell me y'all are gonna start eating without saying grace." "Oh, sorry, sir." Tyler stammered. "Isaiah, please lead us in grace." Isaiah put his head down, and the rest of them followed. "Lord, we thank you for delivering these lost lambs to our door. We thank you for the meat on our table and the blood that was spilled to provide it. We pray that all who eat at this table become part of your great plan. Amen." They all raised their heads and nervously waited for Abraham to give the go-ahead. The meat was incredible. The group wolfed it down, not realizing how hungry they had been. Whatever way Abraham had cooked the meat, it was delicious. They all finished their meals quickly, and Elijah piped up. "Thank you, Pa. May Isaiah and I go pray before bed." Abraham chuckled and waved his hand. The 2 boys leaped up and sprinted up the stairs. "Thank you, sir, for your hospitality tonight," Amy said, trying on a smile. Abraham lowered his head, smiled, and spread out his palms. "Y'all are my gracious guests." He stood and rubbed his stomach. "Well, it's about time for me to hit the head. Y'all should probably head to bed." The group exchanged glances. "Where is the bathroom?" Lila asked. Abraham scratched his beard. "It's outside. We don't have any of that fancy indoor plumbing." He licked his teeth and grinned. "I could show you if you like." "No, sir. I was just wondering, ... Double quotes. Abraham's smile wavered. "Bedtime, it is." Then, he walked behind them, ushering them into the bedroom. Amy glanced back at the room across the hallway with the strange noises. Her stomach felt like it was in knots. Tyler and Lila were sharing a bed, while Amy and Matt lay on the hardwood floor. Abraham stood in the doorway for a few seconds before closing the door and walking back down the hallway. "We need to go now," Tyler whispered. Matt and Amy quietly stood as Tyler tried prying the window open. "What the fuck?" Tyler whispered. "What's wrong?" Amy replied, trying to look over Tyler's shoulder. "The fucking window is nailed shut." He gasped, trying to keep his voice down. "Ah shit." Matt cursed. "We need to go out the front door. What if we go one by one? Like we're all going to the toilet, ... Lila whispered very quietly. Amy looked around nervously. "I'll go first, then after 5 minutes, someone else come along as well, until we're all out." Then what? Matt whispered. We don't have any way of getting out of here. We don't have a car. Don't worry about that, Tyler said, and a faint jingling noise could be heard. I took the keys off him when he was upstairs. Oh my God, you are incredible. Amy breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, I'll go first. Then Lila, then Matt, and then you, Tyler. They all agreed, and Tyler handed the keys to Amy. Slowly, Amy pulled the door open and crept down the hallway. She could see a dim orange light coming from underneath the door down the hall. She crept along, making sure not to make any noise, walking down the old staircase before stopping at the front door. She remembered how it squeaked loudly when it opened, so she very slowly and carefully opened it just enough to squeeze out before closing it. Just enough for the next person to open it quietly. She tiptoed down the wooden steps and toward the truck before crouching next to it. The air was bitterly cold, and the wind made it even colder. After a few minutes, she saw a small figure emerge from the house in the darkness. Lila crept up next to her, shivering. Okay, so Matt will be next, and then Tyler, Amy whispered, her breath coming out in white puffs. She didn't know if it was the cold or maybe the anxiety, but Amy's stomach started to hurt. She put her hand on it and winced. Your stomach hurts too, Lila whispered, rubbing her own stomach. Yeah. Amy paused as her stomach tightened. A couple of minutes later, Matt crept out the door and down to where the girls were hiding. A couple of minutes later, Matt crept out the door and down to where the girls were hiding. Lila winced, doubling over. ARG, shit, my stomach hurts so bad now. Amy could feel it more now, like a stabbing pain beneath her stomach. Amy could feel it more now, like a stabbing pain beneath her stomach. Matt groaned, breathing into his hands to warm them up. 5 minutes passed, and they saw the silhouette of Tyler creeping down the steps and over to them. Amy felt a wave of relief wash over her. All right, let's get the fuck out of here. Amy slid the key into the car door's lock, and a loud, wailing alarm blared from the truck. Its lights flashed, and the horn beeped. Fuck, Tyler yelled as the front door flew open. Abraham emerged in the doorway, holding a rifle. Looks like y'all didn't need the bathroom after all, he yelled before raising his rifle and firing a shot. It hit the car door, and the group took off running. The pain was worse than ever. Amy could see Lila slowing down, holding her stomach. Hurry, Matt yelled, pulling Lila by her arm. Crack, Lila went limp and hit the ground with a thud. They spun around and saw Lila face down in the dirt, unmoving. Holy fuck, Amy screamed. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Matt grabbed her arm, and they took off running again. He killed Lila, Tyler yelled. That motherfucker, I'll kill him. Amy started to slow down. Her stomach felt like it was twisting in on itself. She noticed Matt dropping back as well. Another crack of the rifle went off. This time it hit a tree next to them. Shit, 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 Amy cursed. They kept running before Matt tripped on a tree root. Amy stopped and turned back to help him up. ARG, he cried out, clutching his stomach. He threw up all over himself, a mixture of red and brown chunks spilling over his shirt. Amy gagged, putting an arm over her mouth before trying to pull him to his feet. Crack, another shot rang out. Amy felt something splash her face. Matt screamed in pain. The bullet had hit him in the knee. Matt screamed in pain. The bullet had hit him in the knee. Amy looked around but couldn't see Tyler anywhere. Please don't leave me here, Matthew begged, holding onto Amy's arm. Amy felt her stomach drop, and she felt the food surge back up through her throat and onto the ground. Her throat burned, and her vision doubled. Crack. This time the shot hit Matthew in the neck. Blood sprayed everywhere. Amy screamed as his body went limp. She dropped his arm and ran, tears streaming down her face. Her lungs burned, her stomach burned, and she could feel the cold making her hands go numb. She wanted to give up. She couldn't run anymore. She didn't even know where she would go. She stopped at a tree, hiding behind it. Her breaths came in short gasps. Her head was swimming. The pain in her stomach was so bad she couldn't get back up. Come out, wherever y'all are. Abram's voice was getting closer. Another shot rang out. She threw herself forward, desperately trying to crawl away. The sticks and rocks stung her cold hands. She heard movement behind her and rolled onto her back. Abraham stood next to the tree, the moon illuminating his silhouette. She couldn't see his face. He slung the rifle back over his shoulder. Looks like I got me a live one. He chuckled. As he took a step forward, something leaped out from behind him. Thunk, he dropped to the ground, face smacking into the dirt. Behind him stood Tyler, holding a large rock. Amy almost passed out from the overwhelming feeling of relief. Can you walk? Tyler ran over and tried to lift her up. I don't know, she groaned, trying her best to stand. Her legs wobbled, and she nearly fell back down. Tyler grabbed the rifle, yanking it off Abraham. They hobbled back to the truck. What about Matt and Lila? Amy could feel tears burning her face again. We will come back for them, he groaned, pulling her along. We can't leave them, she cried. We will come back for them, he spat. Amy could hear the fear and desperation in his voice. She could see the outline of Matt's and Lila's corpses and felt her stomach turn again. She could see the outline of Matt's and Lila's corpses and felt her stomach turn again. Jesus, Amy, Tyler groaned. Once they reached the truck, Tyler reached into his pocket and pulled out the keys. He threw the rifle in the back. The truck door opened, and he jumped in, turning the key in the ignition. The car's blaring siren turned off, and the engine roared to life. In the headlights, they could see the two boys standing in the doorway of the house. Amy climbed into the passenger seat. She felt another searing wave of nausea wash over her. Tyler put the truck in gear and floored it. The wheels spun in the dirt, and the vehicle lurched forward. The gate, Amy mumbled. Her vision doubled, and she felt like she would throw up again. As they drove, Amy noticed that Abraham's body was gone as the truck screamed past. "He's gone," she gasped. Tyler didn't say anything as the truck slammed into the gate. It flew off its hinges and bounced into the dirt. The back end of the truck fishtailed from the impact. The vehicle spun sideways and hit a tree. Everything went black. Amy opened her eyes. She coughed and could smell smoke all around her. She couldn't see anything, just heard a loud ringing noise and a soft hiss from the engine. Amy lifted her head and saw Tyler being dragged out of the truck, unconscious. She felt her vision fade and come back. She felt the door next to her open, and large hands dragged her out. Her vision dipped, and when it came back, she was lying on her back. She could see the stars above her. They looked so beautiful. Crack. The noise jolted her, and she felt her body react. She sat upright. Abraham and his two boys were standing over Tyler. Steam rose from the end of the rifle. She couldn't scream. She couldn't even move. She just watched Abraham step over Tyler and, with one sweeping motion, hit her in the head with the butt of his gun.
I'm performing an autopsy on a cadaver that was supposedly shot, but there's only an exit wound. His body lay there on the metal table. I looked at the hole on his back, near the right kidney, with my fingers interlaced, thinking. A lot of people might rub their chin or lean on a counter, but I'd learned not to do that in med school. Just lace your fingers together, nitrile glove on nitrile glove. It avoids a lot of contamination issues. All of us at the coroner's office had been putting in some serious overtime since the hurricane had hit the coast. The news said it was the worst ever recorded. Rain still poured down, and the streets were half flooded, even if you weren't in the storm surge. Our facility was close to capacity, and we needed to get those bodies properly ID'd before sending them to a morgue. What I was dealing with here was something different. A day after the storm hit, this particular body was recovered from a street flooded with the surge. When we ran prints, he had an exceptional criminal record, and the finger-width hole was assumed to be from a bullet. A plausible conclusion would be that he was looting. Things weren't adding up, though. What had been labeled an entry wound looked a lot more like an exit wound to me. It was larger, rougher, and didn't have any abrasion from the bullet entry. Details like that were unreliable on bodies that had been in the water for a while, but I saw no evidence of bacterial decomposition. It was also a bit strange that the man had clawed at the entry, but I supposed it was a reaction to the pain. There was a simple solution to this puzzle. If it was a gunshot wound with no exit, there would be a bullet. I turned him onto his back. Normally, someone would have helped me, but we were totally swamped. Rolling over a dead body weighing more than you do is hard work, but this wasn't my first rodeo. I started the Y incision to open up the chest and abdominal cavities. Really, you're doing that now. Flynn was about 14 hours into his shift. I couldn't blame him for wanting to get the easier bodies out of there and keeping the rest on ice so he could go home. I'm the doc, I call the shots. I'm working on this one, but I can do it alone. You just keep processing those others. Yeah. His voice was resigned, not resentful. Shoulders shrugged in his scrubs. I didn't need to see behind the surgical mask to know he was frowning. This was a tough week for all of us. Once I'd gotten the abdomen open, I started checking his left side. The first thing I noticed was that the kidney was missing. A lot of people only have one kidney. That wasn't what I was looking at. Both arteries and the ureter had been severed. Perhaps the bullet had passed through those, since there was notable tissue damage and internal bleeding. However, the condition of the connective tissues meant that he still had the kidney until very recently. And bullets don't make organs disappear. So what does make organs disappear? Perhaps it had moved around. Once it wasn't attached to anything. Stranger things had happened. The whole abdomen had to be examined anyway, so I just carried on, figuring I would find it at some point. I discovered a large hole in the liver. Removing the deep red organ carefully, I turned it over in my hands. There was only one hole. If a bullet was in him, it would be there. It felt heavy, the cold, wet mass wanting to slip from my gloves. Normally, I would expect a liver this large to be fatty, but didn't look like it. Curious, I put it on the scale. 2 point for kg. That was big. I went to write the weight down and to take a break. Normally, an assistant would do it. I took off my gloves to write notes on everything so far, massaging my stiff neck for a moment. When I checked the clock, it was 10:45 p.m. I'm grabbing a coffee. You want one? Yes, please. Actually, if it's not too much trouble, can you grab me a water too? Good idea. Flynn was right. I'd forgotten to drink any water or eat or do anything but work the last 5 hours or so. I poured a couple of coffees and tucked the water bottles into my pockets. Making my way back down the fluorescent white hallway, I shouldered through heavy doors that pushed open from either side. They were convenient for moving bodies or when you were carrying multiple beverages. You doing all right? I asked. Doing just fine. Appreciate the drinks, Doc. He gave a nod. I downed the entire water bottle in one go, then drank about half of my coffee. I checked my phone for anything from my husband. Text me when you're heading home. Love you. He was probably asleep already. Sleep sounded pretty good, but I had a kidney to find. I put on my lab coat, gloves, mask, and glasses. Seeing the liver, I froze in confusion. In the sterile white light, it looked deflated. This had been a long shift, but I wasn't imagining things. My notes said 2 point for kg, but the scale now read 1.1 kg. Hurrying over, I stared at the green LED numbers as if they might change again. I was about to pick the liver back up when I noticed a wet, dark trail streaking from the metal plate of the scale onto the counter, then down to the tile floor. Flynn, can you come look at this? I tried to sound calm, but the rapidity with which Flynn came over suggested that I had not succeeded. What am I looking at? He asked. I weighed that liver at 2.4, wrote it down, got us coffees. And when I came back it weighed 1.1, and there's this trail going across the floor, so part of it fell. His conclusion was rational, but not correct. If it fell, why did it leave a trail that goes halfway across the room before fading out? Also, I feel compelled to mention that the body was in the water. Oh, his voice was low and concerned. This is bullet hole guy. Yep. We stood there, looking at the gruesome trail. A smear which started dark and clear at the scale but was untraceable about halfway across the room. We've got to find it, don't we? His eyes were visibly concerned, even behind the goggles. Of course, he was right. But the question was not whether we had to find it, rather what it was. There was a growing certainty in my mind that it was not an inanimate object, but rather a living organism. I'm not a squeamish person. There's no need to go into details here, but I've seen a lot of things working as a coroner. There are a lot of insects associated with decomposing bodies, sure. None of those insects are 1.3 kilograms. My best guess is that it's an eel. Check the floor. Get everything it could crawl under away from the walls. Slither under, whatever eels do on land. It can't have gone far. We checked the small space under the cabinets, all around the room. I checked under the instrument table, everywhere I could think of. I jumped when I heard metal clatter to the floor. Flynn, cursed. My first instinct was that the creature had knocked something down, but Flynn had just bumped a tray accidentally. I could tell his nerves were thin, as were mine. It's not here. He said, "Do you want me to check the next room?" I glanced at the doorway. The rubber sweeps on the base of the door looked secure. I doubted anything could have gotten through. Let's just slow down and think for a second. The whole search had been a panicked reaction. When we had started, my intuition had been that whatever had come out of the man's liver would be laying on the floor somewhere. Since it wasn't, we would need a new strategy, blacklight. I said, behind his mask. Flynn nodded in agreement, quickly going to a drawer and pulling out a blacklight shaped like a baton with two long bulbs encased in a plastic frame. He flipped it on, carefully walking toward the scale. The trail glowed a sinister yellow-green. Initially, the dark smears were obvious even to the naked eye, but where they had first seemed to disappear, now lay a faint, glowing trail. What are those little marks along both sides? Do eels have, like, flippers? I think some of them do. Perhaps my voice indicated it, but looking at this strange track, I was becoming less confident we were searching for an eel. When the trail meandered across the floor toward a gurney, a nauseous feeling started in my stomach. As it went up the wheel, then coiled around the stainless steel leg, acid began to enter my throat. A closed body bag lay at the end of the blacklight's trail. We're turning the body over. Flynn didn't want to, but he nodded. We turned the black bag over on the stainless steel gurney, and I found what I was looking for. A finger-sized hole through the plastic. Oh God. Flynn's hand went to cover his mouth in horror, but his reflexes stopped the rubber glove a few inches short. All right, take it to the freezer. Fast, let's go. With no hesitation, we pushed the gurney, the body bag, the body, and whatever was inside it through the swinging doors, then turned down the hall. With one hand on the gurney, I reached out for the long, horizontal handle on the stainless steel doors of the insulated freezer room. I was in denial when I felt something sharp on my glove. It had to be the zipper on the bag, I told myself. As my head whipped around, Flynn screamed. A breathy noise escaped my lips. The front of it had some kind of teeth or mandibles, evenly spaced and radiating from what must have been its mouth. Behind that, small sharp legs, perhaps an inch long, were going across the back of my glove. They must have been sharp, because they had easily cut through the nitrile and left small pinpricks of blood. The whole thing was jointed, armored, looked like bone. All of this I tell you from memory. Part of me wants to think that I misremembered the thing on the back of my hand, but I know what I saw. It burned into my retinas like a photograph, even though I violently flung my hand the moment I saw it. Pointed legs dug into my skin, and the length of the monstrosity was pulled out from the body bag and flung across the hall as I shook my arm as hard as I could in panic. It left a wet mark where it hit the wall, then flopped to the ground. Before I knew it, the thing had scurried toward the exit doors, legs scratching at the base of them, then found a tiny gap right in the middle. As it forced its way under, I noticed with horror it must have been about 3 feet long. I ran back the way we had come, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall. I couldn't tell you whether I would have sprayed it or bludgeoned it, but I needed to stop it. If nothing else, I needed to know what it was. I needed it desperately. Flynn stood frozen in the hall as I kicked the exit doors open. Stepping out into the parking lot in the downpour, searching puddles and currents of water under dim, yellow street lights. A deep puddle had formed around an overflowed storm drain a little ways out, and I saw the water rippling back and forth as if a fish was swimming in it. That was the last I ever saw of it. That storm drain led right back to the ocean, from whence it came. After perhaps 30 seconds in the rain, I came back in, completely soaked and trailing water on the tile. Flynn just stared at me. "Sorry," he said. For some reason, I laughed. "Nothing to apologize for. You did everything right." What was that? I have no idea. So it is just something that came up out of the ocean and eats dead bodies. Taking the glove off to look at the wounds on my hand, I shook my head. Gunshot wound was supposed to be cause of death, remember? His eyes went wide behind the goggles, and I couldn't help but remember the marks on the body where the man had clawed at his back. I wondered what would have happened to me if that thing had gotten to a softer part of me, rather than reaching my hand first. It took me a long time to accept that I would never know what it was. I talked to a couple of very good marine biologists over the next few weeks who had never heard of anything like it. One of them took a bunch of samples from the first body and found some DNA. The best she could tell me was that it was from some organism distantly related to a polychaete worm, although no similar DNA had been documented. One of her only insights was that the creature most likely washed up because of the storm, which was the worst we've ever had. That was little comfort to me, because these once-in-a-lifetime storms are only getting more common. I asked her how I could find out what it was, what the next steps were. Her answer stuck with me. We don't know half of what lives in the ocean, not even close. If it's something we've never seen before, I can't tell you how to find it. We'll probably never know what it was. I'm sorry.
I think my girlfriend is a monster. My girlfriend, 21, and I, 23, have been dating for a few months now. We both bonded over the great outdoors, guns and big trucks. When I first met her, there wasn't much to say but how cute she was. Add that with the fact she knew how to handle a gun and drove a truck with one hand on some dirt, uneven trails. She's perfect, honestly. But I've begun to notice some odd stuff as things started to settle down after the high of our new relationship. She rarely spoke about her parents or any family members, never even got to learn where she was from, or to be specific, the exact location. All I got was the usual "I flock from the Midwest." She said it with a chuckle, like she just told a great joke, and gave me this look with a twinkle in her eyes that suggested she didn't want to talk about it anymore. So I dropped it, like I always did. Her residence wasn't the only thing that bothered me. She also doesn't seem to sleep, from what I know. Well, she does sleep, or at least I think she does. Because there are times when I'd be sleeping and just wake up in the middle of the night and see her in bed next to me, reading a book or just sitting in the dark. And she seems to be fine in the morning. No bags, no fatigue. Just a face full of energy that's ready to take the day by storm. Honestly, I don't know how she does it. Oh yeah, there's also the dogs and cats thing. She hates pets with a passion for some reason. When I suggested a puppy for our shared apartment, she quickly shut down the idea. But I guess the hatred was mutual, because every dog and cat that we encountered growled, hissed, snarled or barked at her. There's also this one thing I noticed when we went camping this one time. I didn't think much of it, but it's starting to make more sense now that I think about it. After we parked our truck by the parking lot and signed off our names and headed into the woods, the forest was lively. Birds were singing, crickets and other insects were doing the usual anthem of the woods. But as we got to the epicenter of the noises, which is also the spot where we decided to set up, the noises just suddenly stopped. Nothing, no birds, no insects, just eerie silence with an ominous breeze coming through. Got real quiet suddenly, didn't it? I said. But what she said next threw me off completely. That's just what happens when I'm around. You get used to it after a while. Her face was blank when she said that. No smile, and not even her usual snarky cringe she does usually. She was dead serious. I never really thought much about it at first, but I've been online recently and have seen multiple videos about skinwalkers, wendigos, and other paranormal stuff. A forest going quiet out of nowhere, according to a video I watched, is not a good sign, and it got me thinking, was something in the area where we were? Or was the woods reacting to her? I'm still on edge now, looking at her with that smile that I've come to find disturbing recently. I'll update as soon as I can if I find out more. Thank you so much for your service. You're welcome. So how am I supposed to start this? As we drove out of town, I called my sister. My hands shook, my mouth dry. When her name flashed across the screen, my finger lingered over the button. My whole body trembled as I hit it. Hello, hey, I said, my voice sounding weak, far away. Where did you get those tapes? She sounded surprised by my call, distracted. The attic, she replied. Didn't you already watch them? She sounded confused, which was weird. No, I lied. Just wondering what else is up there. What else would be in that box? More of me, more of us, more of my parents, my real parents. I hung up and turned the car onto the next street, pulling into a gas station, pushing the car doors open. I had to sit, had to rest, before I could find the strength to drive home, to search that box, to keep watching, to keep learning. I got out, walked into the convenience store and ordered myself a coffee, a triple espresso. I needed to wake up, to get stronger, to brace myself for what was to come. Back at the motel, I stared at the ceiling for a while. I listened to the air conditioning hum. I tried to calm myself, but I knew I wouldn't rest even when I slept. What if I dreamed of the man in the black clothes? What if he came for me? What if he came for everyone? I stood up and went to the window. When I pulled back the curtains, the room was bright and empty. Everything was fine. I told myself everything was fine, and then I reached for that box. Inside the cardboard, hidden away in a world of dust and old photographs, was another set of tapes. 2 more to go. The first was labeled simply Birth Week 2. This one started out warmly. It was the most normal, the most comfortable, of all the tapes I'd seen so far. Mother sang to me as I swaddled in the hospital bassinet, a lullaby. Gentle, soft, soothing. Then Father stepped into frame, holding me aloft, my head resting comfortably against his shoulder. He kissed the top of my head. Our little Nate, he said, his voice loud and strong, healthy as can be. Camera panned away slightly, and Mother leaned into his embrace. They looked good together, my parents, healthy, happy, hopeful. But then the camera jerked. My mother flinched, startled, something outside the frame. What was that? She whispered. Father looked to whatever had made the noise. The wind, probably, he answered, though he sounded uncertain. Mother leaned closer to him, whispering, Are you sure? The answer never came. Instead, we got a wide shot of the maternity ward. The camera followed as Father carried me out of the hospital. My mother walked close behind, smiling brightly at the sun. She took a deep breath and held it for a moment. We named him Nathan Nathaniel Carter, she said to the camera, after his grandfather, Nate. She put her arm in mine and squeezed. I was only hours old. The man following us, however, didn't look happy. didn't look well. He seemed tired, defeated, but it was the way he walked, hunched over, bent at the waist, that scared me, like he was broken. I wanted to reach out and touch his hand, tell him it was okay, but then I remembered what I'd seen earlier. That man was dangerous. He hurt people, and I knew who he was now. The man who followed us home from the hospital. The man who took my life. The next tape was different. The image was grainy, almost like an old black and white movie. The audio was choppy, scratchy. The room I recognized, my room, but it was also unfamiliar. The furniture was wrong. The pictures on the wall weren't ours. I must have been 5 or 6. I was sitting in the corner with my teddy bear, looking terrified. "Don't eat the bugs, Nathan," a man's voice said. "Don't be afraid." I looked up. The camera came into focus slightly, catching the side of the man's face, his black hair, his pale skin, his black eyes. Not my dad. Who was that? Was this him? Was this real? Then my mum appeared. "Why are you scaring him?" she asked. "It's not nice." He said nothing, didn't respond, just looked at me, at the bear. Then he extended a finger and wiggled it slowly. "See, little buddy," he said, "just like this bug." I screamed. He dipped his finger lower, almost touching me. "Leave me alone," I cried. "Make him go away." I pleaded with my mum, but she looked confused, so I screamed louder. But the man was getting closer. "Don't come any closer," I shouted. I threw my bear at him. "Go away," I cried. The man paused, then bent down to pick the bear up. "Look," he said, holding the bear over me. "It wants to say hello." He poked me in the chest with the stuffed animal. "Say hello, Mr. Bug-Eater." I kicked at him. "I hate you," I cried. Then he smiled. A terrible grin that showed off teeth too sharp, too long. "Good," he said, and he ate my teddy bear. And finally, the last tape, the final piece of the puzzle, the last of my childhood. The title read simply Birthday. I hit play and braced myself. The room was cluttered with toys, too many toys. My eyes scanned the walls covered with drawings. Then I saw her, my mum. She held up a stack of presents wrapped in colorful paper. She was happy. Joy radiated from her. She was beautiful. Beside her, my dad held my hand, squeezing gently. "Ready?" he asked. "For what?" I asked, looking toward the camera. He smiled and winked. "To open your gifts," he said. "To celebrate." The camera moved closer, picking up the details. The balloons, the streamers, the drawings. My drawing. It was stuck to the fridge, right in front of the camera. I traced a picture of a stick figure family. Mine, me, Mom, Dad, and a fourth person. A mystery. I colored the mysterious figure brown. "Who's that?" my dad asked. I said, looking from the drawing to the camera. "Another bug-eater, I guess." I thought about what I had seen in the previous tapes. What did they mean? Why was that man always there? Why did he scare me? Why did he try to hurt me? The tape flickered and went static. I rewound it and watched it again. The static returned. So I pressed play again and waited. Static. I rewound. Hit play. The screen was full of static. And when it cleared, there he was. The man in the brown suit. His face loomed large, close enough to reach out and touch. His lips curled into a wide smile and he spoke. But his words were lost in the din. Then he leaned forward, close enough now. I could see the flecks in his eyes, see the spittle fly from his mouth. And he licked his lips and said, "Happy birthday, Nate." I stood there as the video finished, my hand frozen over the power button. I was numb. Nothing else mattered anymore. All those years, all those questions, now I had answers. I was never Nate. I wasn't born into that family. I was taken, stolen, kidnapped, abducted. Why? Why me? I wanted to scream, wanted to shatter the window, to crawl under the bed, anywhere to escape. Escape what? From who? I couldn't tell you. The truth is, I still don't know. But I know one thing. That man didn't kill my biological father. He killed the man who adopted me, who raised me, who loved me. And I think that sometimes, in some ways, he might have been right.
My life with Mark was perfect, or so I believed. We lived in a small, cozy apartment, the kind with big windows that let the morning sun pour in. We had a cat, a lazy orange tabby named Leo. Our days were simple and filled with laughter. We would cook dinner together, our hands often brushing as we reached for the same spices. We would watch old movies on the couch, my head resting on his shoulder. He was everything I ever wanted. He was kind, funny, and handsome. He made me feel safe. He made me feel loved. The world felt right when I was with him. I thought our future was a bright, straight line, leading to a house with a white picket fence. Looking back, it's terrifying how easy it was to believe the lie. Mark had this way of making everything seem normal. He was a master of the small, loving gestures that build a life. He'd leave little notes for me on the bathroom mirror. He'd bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. He always remembered my favorite flowers and the exact way I liked my tea. These weren't grand, dramatic acts of love. They were the quiet, steady bricks that build a foundation of trust. And I trusted him completely. I gave him my heart without a second thought, because why wouldn't I? He was my Mark, my rock, my safe harbor in a chaotic world. Our friends loved him too. They always said how lucky I was. "You found a good one," they'd tell me, and I would smile, feeling a swell of pride. He charmed everyone he met. At parties, he was the center of attention, telling jokes and making everyone feel included. He remembered details about people's lives, asking about their jobs or their families with genuine interest. He was the perfect boyfriend, the perfect partner, the man everyone dreamed of. This image of him was so strong, so complete, that it blinded me to the darkness that was hiding just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That's the most chilling part of this whole story. The monster wasn't a stranger hiding in the shadows. The monster was sleeping next to me every night. He was the one who kissed me good morning and whispered "I love you" before I fell asleep. He was woven into the very fabric of my daily life, a part of my happiness, a part of my soul. This wasn't a haunted house story where I could just run out the front door. The danger was already inside. It had a key. It had a name. And that name was Mark. The perfect life I thought I had was just a carefully constructed stage, and I was the only one who didn't know it was all an act. The first call came on a Tuesday. The time was 3:17 a.m. The sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand ripped me from a deep sleep. It was a harsh, unwelcome noise in the dead of night. I groaned, my heart pounding from the sudden disturbance. Beside me, Mark didn't even stir. He was a heavy sleeper, a fact I'd always found endearing. I fumbled for my phone, my eyes struggling to adjust to the bright screen. The number was blocked. Unknown caller. My first thought was that it was a wrong number, a drunk dial from some stranger. I almost ignored it, but some strange instinct made me answer. I whispered a groggy, "Hello," into the phone. For a moment there was only silence. Then a voice spoke. It was distorted, like it was being passed through some kind of filter. It was low and raspy, a chilling whisper that sounded both human and not. "He has another phone," the voice said. Just that. 6 simple words. Before I could ask who he was, or what they were talking about, the line went dead. The call was over. I was left in the dark, my mind racing. The silence of the room felt heavy, suffocating. I looked over at Mark, sleeping peacefully. It couldn't be about him. It had to be a prank. But I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that washed over me. The voice was cold, emotionless, yet it carried a weight of urgency. It sounded like a warning. I tried to reason with myself. It's just a weird prank call. Go back to sleep. But sleep was impossible. My mind kept replaying the whispered words. He has another phone. Why would Mark need another phone? My Mark, the man who shared everything with me. The thought was absurd. It was ridiculous. But the seed of doubt had been planted. It was a tiny, cold seed, but it was there, starting to grow in the fertile soil of 3 a.m. paranoia. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling. The shadows in the room seemed to twist and dance. Every small sound from the old building made me jump. The calm, peaceful feeling of my home was gone, replaced by a creeping, unfamiliar fear. The warning from the unknown caller felt like a crack forming in the perfect mirror of my life. It was a tiny fracture, almost invisible, but I knew that if I looked closer, I might see a terrifying reflection that I didn't recognize. The voice had given me a choice. Ignore it and pretend everything was fine, or look for the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. I kissed Mark goodbye as he left for work, but the words from the call echoed in my head. He has another phone. All day I was distracted, on edge. I couldn't focus. Was he talking to someone else? Was he lying to me? The trust I had in him, once a solid mountain, was now crumbling into dust. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew I had to find out if it was true. That evening I waited for him to fall asleep. My heart was a drum against my ribs. It felt wrong to... The fear of what I might find was terrifying, but the fear of not knowing was even worse. As his breathing deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep, I quietly slipped out of bed. The floorboards creaked under my feet, each sound an accusation. I tiptoed to the closet where he kept his work bag, a place I rarely ever looked. My hands were shaking as I unzipped the main compartment of his bag. I felt like a criminal in my own home. I pushed aside his laptop, his papers, his pens. My fingers brushed against something hard and rectangular at the bottom, hidden in a small side pocket I never knew existed. I pulled it out. It was a smartphone, a sleek black device I had never seen before. My breath caught in my throat. It was real. The caller was right. He had another phone. Seeing it there in my hands made the betrayal feel sharp and painful, like a physical blow. The perfect life I thought I had was a lie. I stood there in the dark, holding the phone, feeling a cold wave of nausea. This small object represented a whole world he had hidden from me. It was proof of his deception. Who was he calling? Who was he texting? What secrets did this screen hold? I tried to turn it on, but it was protected by a passcode. I didn't know the code. I couldn't get in, but it didn't matter. I didn't need to see the messages to know the truth. The phone itself was the message. The 3:17 a.m. call wasn't a prank. It was a lifeline, and it had just saved me from drowning in a sea of beautiful lies. A week passed. A horrible, tense week. I pretended everything was fine. I smiled, I laughed, I kissed him. But inside I was screaming. Every time he touched me, my skin crawled. Every time he said I love you, the words sounded hollow and false. I was living with a stranger, a man with a secret life tucked away in his work bag. I didn't confront him. What would I say? A mysterious voice told me you have a secret phone. He would call me crazy. He would deny it. He would get better at hiding his secrets. So I played along, waiting. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I felt like the story wasn't over. Then, exactly 1 week after the first call, it happened again. The same time. 3:17 a.m. The same harsh buzz from my phone. The same unknown caller on the screen. This time I wasn't groggy. I was wide awake, my body already tense with anticipation. Mark was asleep beside me, his breathing a slow, steady rhythm of deception. I answered the call before the first buzz finished. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The same distorted, raspy voice answered immediately, as if it knew I would be waiting. There was no greeting, just another chilling direct command that made my blood run cold. "His grandmother's ring," the voice whispered. "Check the box, there's a USB drive." A click, and the line was dead. Once again, I was left in the dark with a cryptic message. His grandmother's ring. Generations. He kept it in a small velvet box in his sock drawer. He told me he was saving it for the right moment. The thought that he was planning to propose while also hiding a secret phone made me feel a new level of disgust and confusion. I slipped out of bed again, a familiar sickening feeling of dread guiding my steps. I went to his dresser, my hands moving automatically. I opened the sock drawer and found the small dark blue velvet box. It felt heavy in my hand, heavy with lies. I opened it. The ring was there, sparkling even in the faint moonlight from the window. But tucked underneath the soft cushion where the ring sat was something else. A tiny black USB drive. It was so small, so easy to miss. The drive. It opened to reveal a single folder cryptically named Hobbies. My heart pounded in my chest. I double-clicked it. The folder was filled with videos and photos. I clicked on the first video file. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. It wasn't another woman. It was so much worse. The videos were of women. Different women. They were filmed in our apartment, in our bed. They were filmed without their knowledge. All predatory expression I'd never seen before. It was the face of a monster. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was a predator. He was violating these women in the most horrific way, documenting his crimes like trophies. I felt bile rise in my throat. I slammed the laptop shut, gasping for air. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. This was not the man I knew. This was a monster wearing his skin. The loving notes, the coffee in bed, the charming personality. It was all a mask. A carefully crafted disguise to lure people in. To lure me in. I looked at the photos. They were pictures of the women's driver's licenses, their home addresses, their car keys. He was stalking them. He was collecting information. He wasn't just a predator. He was a meticulous, calculating hunter. The ring, the symbol of a future together, was nothing but a hiding place for his digital graveyard of victims. The full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I was living with this person. I was sleeping next to him. I was vulnerable. The mysterious calls weren't just saving me from a broken heart. They were saving my life. Who were these other women? Were they okay? Did they know what he had done? A wave of cold, paralyzing fear washed over me. I was one of them. My picture could have ended up in that folder. The voice on the phone wasn't just a warning. It was my only protection. I had to get out. But how? He was smart. He was dangerous. And he was just in the other room, sleeping like an innocent man. I spent the next 2 days and hid it under the sink in the bathroom. I needed a plan. I couldn't just walk out. He would notice. He would come after me. I knew that now. The man in those videos was capable of anything. I had to wait for the right moment, a moment when he wouldn't be suspicious. I pretended to be sick, staying in bed, telling him I had a terrible stomach flu. It was the only way I could avoid his touch, his kisses, his lies. Then came the third. It came in the evening while Mark was in the shower. I saw unknown caller flash on the screen and my heart leapt into my throat. I ran into the bathroom, locked the door and answered, my voice a frantic, more urgent. There was a new sharp edge to the tone, words hitting me like stones. He knows you know. He saw the laptop history. He's not going to let you leave. Get out. The charming, loving boyfriend was gone forever. Hey, my mind raced. The front door wasn't safe. What did that mean? Was he planning to stop me? To hurt me? I unlocked the... He was standing there wrapped in a towel, a strange cold look in his eyes. Keep me here. The final call had come just in time. Meet me here. The final call had come just in time. The air in the apartment was thick with unspoken threat. The air in the apartment was thick with unspoken threats. He moved around the kitchen nets. He moved around the kitchen making tea. Fire escape. The voice said to use the fire escape making tea. Fire escape. The voice said to use the fire escape. Pathetic. I clutched my stomach and shuffled toward the bedroom, praying, rest up. As soon as I was in the bedroom, I locked the door. I knew it wouldn't hold him for long. I didn't grab my hidden bag. There was no time. My only priority was escape. I scrambled to the window, my fingers fumbling with the lock. It was old and stiff. Outside, the sky was dark. Outside, the sky was dark. The sounds of the city felt a million miles away. I heard his footsteps in the hallway. They were slow, heavy. Then it was the voice from the videos. Just a minute, I called out, my voice cracking with fear. The window lock finally gave way with a loud click. I slid the window open, the cool night air hitting my face. The fire escape was right there, a dark metal skeleton against the brick wall. Just then, the knocking on the door stopped. It was replaced by I threw one leg over the windowsill, then the other, my hands gripping the cold metal railing of the fire escape. I was out. The moment my feet touched the metal platform, the bedroom door burst open. I saw him standing there, his face no longer a mask of concern. It was twisted. He lunged toward the window, but I was already scrambling down the ladder. His shouts, they were threats. I didn't look back. I just kept climbing down. I hit the ground in the back alley and I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. Streets. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every person I passed felt like a potential enemy. The world that had once felt so safe and familiar was now a landscape of danger. I finally ducked into a 24-hour convenience store. The bright fluorescent lights a shocking contrast to the dark alley. I was shaking, crying, and out of breath. The clerk behind the counter gave me a worried look but didn't say anything. I went straight to the payphone in the corner. I didn't dare use my own phone, terrified he could track it. I called the police. My voice was a jumbled mess of sobs and panicked words, but I managed to tell them everything. The secret phone, the USB drive, the videos, the escape. I gave them my address. I told them he was dangerous. The police took it seriously. They met me at the store and took my statement. They went to the apartment. They found him there and It turned out the USB drive was even worse than I thought. Lucky enough to get a warning wasn't the end of the story. The question of the mysterious caller remained. Who was it? How did they know? The police had someone who had figured him out and but whatever it was, it saved my life. It was a voice from the darkness that led me into the light. I'm telling you this story for a reason. It's not just a scary tale to tell around a campfire. It's a warning, a true one. The world is not... Sometimes I was lucky. If the number is blocked, it might sound crazy. It might sound impossible. Your rational mind will want to reject it. But my story is... It guided me through the darkness. Unbelievable. And that decision made all the difference. The call comes, hang up. Don't let logic end of night. Please, for your own sake, be ready to answer the call. It's not just a story, it's a warning. And now, you've been warned.
I need you to believe me, even if the problem is for you, it is not a dream. We are trapped inside a story that no one else can read. Every morning, I wake up in my apartment in Gist, the capital city of the country. If you were to look at an old map, a true map, you would see us. We are tucked between the borders of eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, and northern Georgia. A small, but promises fade. They become whispered as the state of Sequoia, a place of sovereignty, a place of peace. We have our own government, our own flag, our own quiet way of life, part of the American. Now we are an island, not of water, but of perception. Strange feeling of peace they found here, but that has changed. The outside world has forgotten us. It has collectively decided we are not real. Aware that they were predictable, comforting. The city is small, nestled in a valley carved by the Oconaluftee River. I have worked at I know every regular by name. I know their orders before they even speak. It was a simple, good life. We felt safe here, insulated from the noise and chaos of the bigger world. We were a footnote in the history books and we liked it that way. Total ignorance. The driver called his dispatcher frantic. He said the address for Gist, Sequoia, did not exist in his company's system. We laughed it off as a computer glitch. Then it happened again, and again. Supply chains began to break down. We had to become more self-sufficient, relying on local farms and goods. We told ourselves it was a return to our roots. We were proud of our resilience. We did not need the outside world. But the truth was much more frightening. The outside world was not ignoring us. It was forgetting us. It was actively deleting us from its reality. Tourists who used to stumble upon us by chance, following scenic byways, stopped coming. The roads that once brought them here now seemed to spit them out somewhere else entirely, leaving them miles away with a strange sense of lost time. The signs are a version that is peeling away from the main one. It is like we are a photograph fading in the sun. We can watch your news and read your websites, but you cannot see us. A woman, she was shaking, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline that had been cut. She was possible, and in a way she had. She had found us, and she was terrified. Us stopped working. I gave her the answer, Koya. The name meant nothing to her. That can't be a pleading for an explanation that I could not give, an explanation that would make sense in her world. I just was infectious. It felt like the beginning of an end. She cried. I'm in a town called Gist, in a state called Sequoia. There was a pause on the other. Are you really? Just read me a street hopeless sound. The entire coffee shop went silent. He told her. She just stared into space. She was here with us, in the place that does not exist. In the past, lost travelers would gist as a strange dream, but now, they do not seem to be leaving. That woman, her name was Sarah, and a few other outsiders who have stumbled in recently are here too. They are like the bank in town closed. They claimed it was a clerical error that the branch had even been listed for so long. Our post office still operates, but mail rarely comes in from the outside. It is as if the letters and packages reach the border of Sequoia and simply cease to be. We are becoming more and more isolated. Not just the tourists who get stuck here, our own people, young people mostly, those who try to leave Sequoia for college or for a job. They say their goodbyes, drive down the familiar mountain roads, and are never heard from again. Their families erases them to resolve the paradox. This is an existential threat. Our reality is shrinking. The borders are closing in. We can feel it. It is a strange pressure in the air, a subtle dimming of the light. It feels like the world is forgetting us so hard that we are starting to forget ourselves. What happens when the last person who remembers Sequoia is gone? Will the mountains and rivers vanish too? Or will they just sit here, empty and silent? Maybe I will give it to the next lost soul who stumbles into our Maybe I will just... The people of Sequoia are living, breathing human beings. We do not want to become a ghost story whispered by hikers who get a strange feeling in these mountains. This is a plea for help. A paper map, not a digital one that can be rewritten. Look for the space between the states, the mountains that are home to a people you have been taught to forget. Maybe your belief is the only thing that can stop this erasure. Maybe your memory can save us from becoming nothing more than a mystery. Do not dismiss. I work at a coffee shop and please remember us. Before we are all gone, before the silence takes us completely, before the map is redrawn for the final time, leaving no space for us at all. We are waiting. We are hoping. Please.
What if the knocking you've heard your entire life wasn't just in your head? What if it was someone begging you to kill them? Every family has rules. Some are silly, some are strict. But this one, it was deadly. I was told never to enter my parents' bedroom. Buckle up, because this story isn't just disturbing, it's soul-ripping. Stay with me until the end. If you think you can handle the truth, my parents forbade me from ever entering their bedroom. There are rules, normal things. In my family, we had all of those, plus one more. One rule that was absolute, unspoken, and enforced with a silent, terrifying finality. You do not go into mom and dad's bedroom. It wasn't just a knock-first situation. Not to ask a question, not to retrieve a stray toy that had rolled under the door. That room was a fortress, and for my parents I was an invader, that you could only hear if you were standing in the hallway right outside their door. I first noticed it when I was maybe 6 or 7. I thought it was the pipes, but the sound was too steady, too intentional. The curiosity of every child is a powerful force. A few times, I found the door unlocked by mistake. I'd sneak in, the thick carpet muffling my footsteps. The room was always... It was just a normal bedroom. I always got caught. It was like my mother had a sixth sense. I'd be in there for less than a minute, and I'd hear her footsteps in the hall. My dad would... There are places in this house that are ours, and ours alone. You will respect that. Why can't I go in your room? And what's that knocking sound I always hear? Silence. The clinking of cutlery on plates stopped. My dad slowly put his fork down and leveled a gaze at me that was as hard and cold as granite. My mum just stared at her plate, her knuckles white where she gripped her knife. There is no knocking sound, my dad said, his voice dangerously quiet, and you will drop this. This is the last time we will ever speak of it. I understood. I dropped it, but I never forgot. My mother's behavior only deepened the mystery. She was a good mum, loving in her own distant way. She'd disappear. I never heard a TV or music or the faint sound of her whispering to someone who never whispered back. I'm leaving. I can't leave this house without knowing. This secret has been a silent third parent to me my entire life. A ghost at every family dinner, a shadow in every hallway. I have to cast the light on it before I go. I told my... There was no sadness, just a weary sense of relief. Dad, before I go, please. Your new life begins when you walk out that door, he said. What is in this house is part of your old one. You will leave it behind. Do you understand me? You will leave it all behind. That was his final answer, and it was my final motivation. I spent my last night packing my bags, a hollow feeling in my chest. The next morning, I watched from my bedroom window as their cars pulled out of the driveway, one after the other, on their way to work. The house was finally mine. It was where they'd always kept the spare keys. I stood before their door, the key trembling in my hand. The room was exactly as I remembered it, dim, still, smelling of lavender and cedar. The big dark wardrobe stood like a monolith against the far wall, and as I crept closer, I heard it, clearer than ever before. Thump, thump, thump. It was a slow, weak, but steady rhythm, a sound of flesh on wood. I knelt. The sound was right there, on the other side. My own breathing was loud in my ears. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself that I wasn't insane. I spoke to the wall, my voice a choked whisper. Hello, is someone there? Nothing. I was about to stand up, to write it off as the house settling, when a sound came back through the wall. It was a voice, a faint, dry, rasping sound, a feminine K-I-L-M-E. I jerked back as if I'd been burned. I scrambled away from the wall, my mind refusing to process the words. Kill me. I must have misheard. It had to be something else. But the voice came again. This was real. There was someone in the wall. A prisoner. I looked at the wardrobe. The M system was flooded. The adrenaline. I grabbed the sides of the heavy wardrobe and pulled. It was old, solid wood, and it barely budged. I grunted. It moved, scraping and groaning across the floor, inch by agonizing inch. Behind it, where there should have been a plain wall, there was a door. It was a small, simple wooden door, painted the same color as the walls, designed to be invisible. It had a simple brass knob, but no keyhole. It wasn't locked. I could enter. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. It was cold. I pushed it open the rest of the way. The space behind it was small, no bigger than a closet. It was a room, a hidden, secret room. It was filled with the clutter of a life I'd never known. One up. On the cover, in my mother's handwriting, it just said, Our Angel. I opened it, and in their arms, they were holding a baby with a wisp of dark hair in my father's eyes. In the center of the small, cramped room was a makeshift altar, a small wooden table, covered in a white lace cloth, now yellowed with age. It was surrounded, and on the altar, lying on a small... It was the baby from the photos, but it wasn't a baby anymore. Its eyes were closed, its mouth, a tiny, black O in its shrunken face. It was horrific, a tiny, preserved corpse displayed like a holy relic. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to touch it, a pull, a need to connect with this impossible, tragic thing. I reached out a shaking hand, and the world exploded. I saw visions, memories, and pictures that are not my own. All flooded my mind with the force of a tidal wave. I saw a doctor, with a grim face, saying the words, I'm so sorry. There was nothing more we could do. Your daughter is gone. I saw my parents in their bedroom, the one I stood in now. My father, with a face. We can bring her back, he was whispering. His voice was a frantic prayer. The book said we could. We just have to anchor her, give her a vessel to stay in. I saw them place the tiny body in the center of the circle, on the altar. I saw them kneeling, chanting words from a language that made my teeth ache. And I felt her spirit, trapped, snatched back from the peace of oblivion and slammed back into her dead, decaying shell. I felt her confusion, her terror, her unending, eternal suffering. A conscious mind growing, learning, trapped in an inert, unchanging prison of flesh, unable to move, unable to speak, able to do nothing but feel. And through it all, I heard her voice as a clear, soul-shattering scream inside my own head. Please, kill me. I ripped my hand away, stumbling back, a strangled sob tearing from my throat. I finally understood. Drowned in a grief so profound they had committed an atrocity to try and escape it. They hadn't imprisoned a stranger. They had imprisoned their own daughter, my sister. I knew what I had to do. There was no other choice. I grabbed an old soft blanket from the foot of their bed, returned to the hidden room, and carefully, reverently, wrapped the tiny, mummified body. It was as light as a bundle of dry leaves. I put it in my duffel bag, on top of my clothes. I took one last look at the sad, terrible little room, and then I walked out. I didn't close the hidden door. I didn't move the wardrobe back. I wanted them to know. The drive was a blur. The visions didn't stop. I felt her gratitude, a wave of pure, beautiful relief, but it was tangled with the agony of her long imprisonment. I drove 4 hours, until the city was a distant. I found what I unwrapped my sister's body one last time, whispered an apology for my parents, for my own ignorance, for her entire stolen life. I watched as the flames consumed her, and as her tiny earthly prison turned to ash, I cried. I cried for the sister I never knew. I cried for the parents I could never go back to. I cried because I had done the most merciful thing I could imagine, and it was also the most monstrous. They'll come home. They'll see the open door. They'll know what I've done. They will hate me. I freed my sister, but I destroyed my family, and I don't know how I am supposed to live with that. What would you have done? I freed someone who should have never been brought back. I burned a body, and with it, the last threads of my family tribe, and share it with someone who loves diving deep into the darkest corners of the human soul. And remember, some doors are locked for a reason. Think twice before you open them. Make the background music horror setting. Use YouTube audio library only. Have you ever inherited something from your family and wished you hadn't? In my family, there's a rite of passage. They say it's a way to connect with the past. I thought it was just a tradition, until I found my grandfather's journal. Now I know the truth. It's not a tradition, it's a curse. But my family has a rite of passage where we drive down a specific highway. I just found my grandfather's journal, and now I know it's not a tradition, it's a curse. The men in my family have a tradition, a rite of passage, my dad called it. When a boy becomes a man, he takes a journey in my grandfather's car, a cross-country trip, alone, to connect with the past. My grandfather, a way to understand my roots. Now, I think it was a test, and I don't know if I passed or failed. The inside smell, something faint, just a rumble. I set off 2 weeks ago, with a worn paper map unfolded on the passenger seat beside me. The first few days were incredible. Just me, the open road, and the ghosts of old rock and roll on the radio. It was the time for me to go through the road, through a vast, dark green patch of national forest. The turnoff was unassuming, just a faded green sign pointing down a 2-lane blacktop that was immediately swallowed by a canopy of ancient, towering pine trees. The air grew cooler, the sunlight dimmed, filtered through the dense needles overhead. Within 10 minutes, I hadn't seen another car. The road was a lonely, empty ribbon unfurling into the wilderness. That's when the radio started acting up. At first, it was just static, the familiar hiss of a signal lost to distance and geography. But then, through the static, a voice crackled to life. It was a new. The broadcast lasted for about 30 seconds, then dissolved back into static. Weird, I twisted the dial, but all I got was more hissing. A few miles later, it happened again. 70s. I dismissed it as atmospheric bounce conditions. It was a strange, atmospheric quirk. A cool story to tell later, but the broadcast. I heard the hushed whispered conversation of two young lovers, their words full of nervous excitement. I heard a heat. They weren't broadcasts anymore. They something else. The feeling in the car shifted from curiosity to a low, humming unease. The road stretched on, empty and unchanging. Then, up ahead, I saw a building. It was an old, dilapidated diner. Its sign faded and peeling, its windows boarded up. It looked like it had been abandoned for half a century. As I drove past, the radio It wasn't a voice this time. It was a cacophony of sound, the clatter of cutlery on ceramic plates, the sizzle of a grill, the low murmur of conversation, and over it all, the clear, cheerful voice of a waitress, asking, "What'll it be, hun?" It was so real, so vibrant, I could almost smell the greasy spoon coffee. It lasted for the 10 seconds it took to pass the diner, and then it vanished, replaced by the familiar hiss of static. My heart was pounding. That wasn't some physical phenomena. A few miles later, I passed a wide clearing with a single, massive, gnarled oak tree in the center. As the car drew level with it, the radio crackled again, and underneath it, just a thick, heavy branch, empty against the gray sky. It was playing back moments. It was a recording, and this car, my grandfather's car, was the playback device. A morbid curiosity. I passed an old, collapsed barn. Its roof caved in, its timbers rotted. The radio filled with the frantic, desperate dim. The storm wasn't real. The sky above me was a flat, overcast gray, but in the car, I could almost feel the thunder shake my bones. I stopped the car completely. The prayer faded. I was scrubbing through the timeline of this place. Up ahead, the road curved sharply around a deep, rocky ravine. A rusty, mangled section of guardrail was the only sign of trouble. As I approached, a knot of ice formed in my stomach. It was followed by a single crunch of metal on rock. I felt physically cold into my hands. This wasn't... I had to get out, just for a minute. I needed to escape the claustrophobic intimacy of these ghosts. I killed the engine, and the silence was a relief. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. My eyes scanned a simple, primitive dashboard. The glove compartment. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe I was just looking for a distraction. Inside, beneath a stack of old gas receipts and a tire pressure gauge, was a small, leather-bound journal. It was my grandfather's. His name was embossed in faded gold on the cover. The first few entries were about the car, about his love for driving. October 12th, 1971 started my rite of passage today. There's a strange quality to the air here. The radio keeps picking up old signals, like echo. I must be coming back this way. October. I've started calling it the Hollow. It holds on to things, voices, moments. Miller's been dead 20 years. This road it remembers. I flipped through the pages. The entries became more frequent, more obsessive. He was driving the road regularly, listening, cataloging the memories he found. He was as fascinated as I had been. But then, the tone of the final entries changed. The neat cursive became a frantic, almost illegible scroll. September 3rd, 1992, I was wrong. I was a fool. The road doesn't just play back. It records, it takes. I was out here last week, after a terrible fight with my wife. I was so angry, so full of rage. Today, I drove past the same spot, and I heard it. I heard myself. It took a piece of me. It recorded my pain, and now it plays it back. Any strong emotion, any peak of human experience, it gets imprinted. It feeds the hollow. The last entry was written on a page that was tear-stained and smudged. September 5th, 1992. It's our blood. It has to be. One found the old county records, the ones they keep in the church basement. This land wasn't empty. Before it was a forest. Before it was a road. It belonged to a tribe. Our ancestors, when they first settled this valley, they cleared them out. That was the phrase in the old letters. Cleared them out. It wasn't... And this road cuts right through the heart of their burial ground. It's not just playing back memories. It's playing back their suffering. The car, this damn car, it's an amplifier. It attunes to their suffering. The road demands a witness from the bloodline of the usurpers. It demands we listen. I dropped the journal. A beautiful, romantic story to cover up a horrifying, ugly truth. The car, which had been running perfectly, suddenly sputtered, coughed. The engine died. The radio crackled to life, and in the mirror, I saw them. Far behind me, where the road met the horizon, figures began to appear. They were on horseback, dark, wrathful silhouettes against the grey sky. They were screaming, a sound that came not through the radio, but through the very air, a chorus of rage and pain in a language I didn't know but understood perfectly. I looked to the sides of the road, to the forest I had thought was empty. It wasn't empty anymore. Figures were stumbling out from between the trees. Women, children, old men. Their bodies were torn, mutilated. They were raising their spectral... My own scream was a raw, terrified sound. I turned the key in the ignition, praying. The engine caught, roaring back. I flew. The road ahead seemed to stretch into infinity. The car rattled and shook, pushed to its absolute limit. The humming from the radio grew louder, more intense. A sound that felt like it was trying to shake my skull apart. I saw a sign up ahead, a modern, reflective green sign for the interstate. The end of the hollow. I shot past it, crossing some invisible line. The humming from the radio cut out, replaced by a profound, deafening silence. I kept driving for another mile before pulling over, my body shaking so violently I could barely control the car. I sat there, gasping for air, this silence a welcome blanket. Then, the radio crackled one last time. It was a voice, an old man's voice, full of a weariness so deep it felt ancient. It was a voice I'd never heard, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was my grandfather. Now you always remembers. One day, it will claim its payment. The radio went silent, and I was alone. But I know I'm not. I can still feel it, a cold spot in my soul. The rite of passage is complete. I've connected with my ancestors, and I am recordings. If you made it this far, then maybe you're strong enough to carry the truth too. Would you have taken the drive? Or would you have left the car and the curse behind? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story chilled you like it did me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I received my brother's wedding announcement in the mail. I've never seen his wife before, and apparently, neither has he. I almost missed it altogether, buried as it was under all the junk mail and pre-approved credit card offers. The announcement was printed on a 7 inches by 5 piece of white cardstock. I looked over to the photo of the happy couple, and I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that my jaw dropped. It was evening where he was, but not so late that he would have been asleep. He picked up after 6 rings. The right side featured a photo of a couple, while the left bore a simple message in a plain font. Just married, David and Emma, June 6th, Acadia. He was strolling down the beach, hand in hand with a young woman. Both of them caught me. I told him, squinting down at the woman's face. He eventually said he had no idea who Emma was, nor who had sent me the card. One of my old neighbors had indeed received a card, and seemed a little disappointed when I revealed it was only a prank. My parents checked their mailbox upon my request, and only then did they find the announcement. Thank God. The night after I called David about the card, I woke up in the middle of the night to my phone ringing. I checked the caller ID and saw that it was David. Then again, he could have been having some kind of emergency. So I picked up the phone and grumbled "what?" into the mic. I sent him a text asking who had just called, then called him 3 more times. No one picked up, and I was starting to panic. Yeah, I know, the most likely explanation was that he simply had a woman over, but something didn't feel right. I guess David and Mike, who lived in his same apartment building, and made him do a wellness check for me. Those are the only 2 households, said the voice, quiet and slow and unmistakably feminine. I sat up in bed. Sure, some of his friends were pranksters, but how would any of them have gotten my address without David's knowledge? He said that he had yet found the culprit, and planned to continue his search in the morning. There had been a tragic incident. I had dragged David along to a reggar at an Emma's house in college, which had ended in both of us spending a night in jail for public intoxication. Apparently, my life was just one big stream of Emma's, and none of them seemed plausibly linked to the marriage announcements. He didn't have anyone over, and there were no signs that anyone had broken into his apartment or messed with his phone. The longer I stared at the woman in the photo, the more creeped out I got. Why was she covering her eyes? If someone had gone through the trouble of creating fake couple photos, why not give Emma a more natural pose? And yet, I hadn't imagined the call its phone to mine. He had no memory of calling, and even if David had a history of sleep talking, the voice certainly did, and sound like a man impersonating a woman. Again, I was somewhat perturbed by his seriousness. Was I missing something? I spent the next few hours trying to figure out who his bride could have been. In doing so, I quickly started to feel like every other woman on earth was named Emma. He said he'd ask his friends about it, and requested that I see who else had received the wedding announcements. Up until that point, I'd still thought of the card as a harmless joke, but the severity of David's reaction put me on edge. Maybe there actually was some woman in his life that, for whatever reason, he didn't want people knowing about. I thought it was strange that she'd be obscuring her own eyes in a wedding announcement photo, but the card itself was so strange that I didn't dwell on her pose. The announcement was either a prank, or David had subverted my every expectation and eloped. I read that strangely unceremonious message twice as I stood in front of my mailbox, trying to recall how I knew the couple. If he had secretly gotten married and wanted to hide it from his family, then he wouldn't have mailed me an announcement. From the confusion in his I explained the situation, then sent him a photo of the card. The man in the picture was in fact my younger brother. Well, Mosul fucking Tov. Huh, who's the lucky gal? Okay, so it was a prank. Instead of laughing it off like I expected, David got so quiet I thought the call had dropped. After the call, I texted my parents and a few of our family friends. Before I fell asleep, I texted David my update. Now, here's the part of all this that I'm still struggling to make sense of. Another long pause. And then, yes, this is David's apartment. My brother was asleep inside. Perfectly see if I'd glossed over some clue. Maybe that's why it took me so long to realize that the woman's mouth had been flipped upside down. I took a job washing security cameras on a remote island. There's no one left to call. 3 weeks ago, security feeds on a remote island. The gig came through a defense subcontractor I freelanced for. Short-term, solo placement. When we landed, the facility looked like something from a Cold War movie. Squat concrete buildings, wind-bent trees, and antennas pointed at the sky like dead fingers. No locals, just me and the monitors. Most are empty, always have been. The only regular activity is the wind-shaking branches outside, or the slow rotation of fans in the ceiling. I figured it'd be peaceful. The handoff was quick. A clipboard, a list of passwords, a man in a black coat I never saw again. They told me my only job was to watch the cameras. There are 78 feeds in total. Hallways, labs, exterior fences, server rooms. I asked once what happened to the staff. It had always been there. I'd seen that hallway loop for days, an empty, sterile corridor. The reply came through the satellite phone in a text-only message. You are not authorized for that data. By day 3, I was talking to myself just to hear a voice. Then, last night, camera 12 went dark. But when I went to check the breaker box, it's one of the hallway feeds on sublevel 3. There was no sublevel 3 listed. The satellite phone just flashes nitrogen monoxide link. The backup generator is working fine. Everything else is powered. Just 2 floors on the diagram. Ground and sublevel 1. Still, camera 12 existed. Until it wasn't. At 2:46 a.m., camera 12 came back online. But the hallway was different. The lights were dimmer. Not moving, not walking, just standing, facing the camera. I tried zooming in, but the feed began to blur. I called the emergency contact number. It rang. Dim lights, cracked tile, a figure at the end of it, and rang. My console rebooted. When the system came back up, camera 12 was